All right. And we are live. Welcome. Drag the Lake. It's Drag the Lake now, by the way. I've I think I've had you on every version of a podcast I've ever had. But I had a me and my bro Pat, who do a lot of these pods together. We had an aha moment and we're like, hey, maybe rather than have a 97 podcast, what if it was just all in the same thing? And I
Right.
go, Pat, that's crazy enough to work. So now I have the wonderful, the full of knowledge, the schizophrenic Austin Wade Picard here on Drag the Lake. And I'm very excited for this one. We're going to be talking about Columbine, which, dude, I got to be honest, it's so funny to like all the things that I like because all it's just all my social media presence. I'm just posting about all that stuff all
Right.
the time, and it'll be funny where I'll be like, here's some new songs I'm into, and then today I'm just posting on my Instagram being like, so we're gonna do a deep dive in Columbine today, and I'm like, what does that look like to other people? But no, Austin's got a dope podcast, the Underclass podcast, and I've said it publicly many times before. It's quite possibly one of the best spooky music conspiracy podcasts out there, and he's
Thank you.
but no, it is really the best. Austin's the most well researched, the least schizophrenic, and the most articulate. So it's definitely go check out the Underclass podcast. It's what you need to check out when you're listening to quote unquote. Well, I don't even like the fucking term anymore,
Mhm.
conspiracy. I'm just like, too many of them get proven right. I'm like, they're just it's history now. You fucks.
Exactly. Yeah. It does seem like the alternative kind of conclusions that you come to once you actually dig into the details regarding most of these cases. Yeah, the world opens up to you and you realize that all of recorded history is seemingly just, you know, some sort of a manufactured fantasy world for the low frequency general public who are kind of in this cartoonish version of reality. And it's this
I not to cut
inability.
you off immediately.
Yeah.
I really like low frequency because for the longest time, I wasn't a fan of the term normie. I felt like it
Mhm.
was like too condescending, but something about low frequency feels nice. Anyway, I'm sorry.
Right. No, I agree. I think because it's really we are kind of thrust into this unfortunate position where we're at a disadvantage from the inherently from the beginning, from day one of our life experience. So it takes so much kind of being able to almost recondition yourself from this level of programming that you've been enduring from such an early age, and that is such a difficult prospect for the vast majority of people due to the level of commitment and discipline you have to kind of really walk this fine line and still reflect at every turn to make sure you're not falling into these traps of confirmation bias and things of that nature that kind of cloud your critical thinking skills and your ability to think objectively regarding most of these cases as well. So yeah, I think low frequency is a better term because it's not as insulting and off-putting, because I think
Yeah.
all of us kind of came from that exact same sort of psychological framework and environment that as I said, it was really kind of this I always mention the Big Lebowski, right? When as far as just Donnie talking to Walter and the dude whenever they're sitting there watching the performance of the dude's landlord who's like going through presenting his cycle basically, which seemed like it was his period, which was very strange. But either way, it was hilarious because in that scene, Walter freaks out on Donnie because Donnie basically mentions the In-N-Out burger that's near the area that they're going to go to find the individual, Larry Sellers, who his homework was in the dude's car right after it was stolen, and
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and I just always thought it was hilarious because Walter freaks out on him and says, "Donnie, you're like a child who woke up in the middle of a movie theater." And I feel like that's all of us, right? We're
Yeah.
kind of trying to figure out the plot in the middle of the film, and each and every one of us need to make sure we have this firm understanding of really what seems to be, I guess, what's the term, revisionist history. But in reality, revisionist history seems to be far more accurate in terms
Yeah.
of the reality we face, this formidable threat that is far more sophisticated than I think we can comprehend, you
No,
know?
I was trying to think of terms the other day, but like they all just sound cringy. It's like I can't find, it's like I feel like I forget if it was oh, who's the dude who's always talking about like monarchy and stuff like that? Yaren, whatever his
Oh,
name is.
yeah.
And he thought of the term the cathedral because I think he thought of it, and then Michael Malice like helped popularize it. And I'm
Mhm.
sure there was a million terms for it, but there's something about when you just hit him with cathedral, you're like, oh yeah, that fucking rips. So
Right.
I feel like we haven't figured because conspiracy is not fair anymore, especially too. It's like such a loaded term. There's like the above implied you're a stupid fucking idiot who's a piece of shit if you do that. Like, and I was trying to think of like disputed history or something like that. But yes, there does need to that's kind of what it is,
Mhm.
where there's certain history that we all kind of broadly agree on, but there's just little things here and there that people kind of will sort of dispute. And then there's history where, the quote unquote mainstream goes, it happened this way. And then there's a bunch of dudes like us going, nuh-uh. And that's like, we need a new term for, I don't know, just call it nuh-uh history. But
Right.
one
And
of the, go ahead.
oh, I was just thinking that if you really the new conspiracy theory term has become the black pill in a certain
Mm,
way, as far as just I feel like it's far more relevant in terms of the influencer industrial complex as it stands today. And I'm
I love
realizing
that term.
I'm very proud of that because I recently just considering Candace Owens and these various prominent figures within this landscape, who I'm very skeptical of, due to various details,
Sure.
yeah, surrounding their rise to prominence. And and I feel like there are far too many red flags for anyone to just take what they have to say at face value and not be in full karate stance as they present the information. It's very difficult for me, and I feel like I can really pick up on disingenuous behavior and also ego trips. They're kind of disgusting to me, and I think it's
Yeah,
far.
we've talked about that a lot. That was the deeper I got into this community or whatever you want to call it,
Mhm.
the egos in being like it's so funny to be like, oh yeah, we're uncovering the Satanist cabal, but also I have to be the guy who uncovers it.
Exactly.
You're like, hey man, whoever helps us have a lot less kids getting raped to death, whoever it is, just can someone do it?
Exactly, man. And it's ridiculous though, because just the term conspiracy theorist, if you remember, was manufactured by the CIA during the Warren Commission hearing.
Yeah.
And that was all due to the level of commitment the CIA and the agency itself was obviously attempting to really control the outcome in every way. And it feels as if you know, ever since honestly, it's very strange to me in terms of the reality behind what the term was meant to achieve, which was to discredit entirely any sort of dissident opinion regarding the Warren Commission report on the JFK assassination. So anyone who would have the audacity to question the official narrative would then de facto become,
Yeah.
some sort of communist sympathizer that might as well be Lee Harvey Oswald,
Well,
right? And
they basically trained people when someone has a fair to logical question, they've
mhm,
trained people to go like, well, that's probably the biggest retard I've ever met. And it like
exactly.
because I've caught it myself a lot of times. Like I'm not sitting here thinking I'm fucking, I'm not like I understand how I am. I'm not the most convincing guy all the time. I'm not the smartest guy in the fucking room, but I've got fair arguments and like the way people talk to me, like they've seen, it's like they're looking. I always joke, people talk to me like they're watching a dog drive a car, and they're like, they're just like, well, it's clearly something else is going on because there's no way he could be driving the car. Like, I swear to God. And I think a
That's
little of
hilarious.
that might be my own insecurities, but that's how I feel sometimes when people sort of just roll their eyes at me on certain things, but it is like I feel like people have been in mass trained to go like, oh, that absolutely fair question is actually the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life.
Exactly. And if you kind of refuse to engage in the political theater and kind of subscribe by bending the knee to that of the political puppets that are just actors, kind of leveraging public perception for the benefit of the permanent establishment, ratcheting up, escalating the culture war at every level. I think it's all about, I mean, discord, accelerationist, is really the philosophy behind it, you have this tactic of division that has always been relied upon in that context, and so with the black pill moniker, it really has just become it's kind of like this again, it's this new, I forgot the term for it, but it's the new conspiracy theory term, right? That's being sort of leveraged in this underhanded way that clearly has, in an attempt to discredit anyone who is basically poking holes in the reality of this very well orchestrated pageantry. That is, I think, the most difficult prospect due to the fact that so many people subscribe, let's just say emotionally and ideologically to the personalities in the political kind of paradigm, and that's really just creating smoke and mirrors and basically muddying the waters by design. So you will effectively kind of latch on to these low hanging fruit policy agendas and kind of entrench yourself further in these terrible ideas that don't ever actually address the root cause of anything and the structure of the current power paradigm in any real way. So we continue to facilitate and usher through the dystopian agenda, right, as it's consistently exploited. So that's what I can just see on a day-to-day basis, and it's something that I kind of have just embraced the notion of, okay, you can call me black pilled, that's fine, but in reality, I think I'm just attempting to address the true threat that is facing us as far as society at large. And I do
Yeah.
think this is a permanent establishment that has been very well entrenched for generations, utilizing these kind of genealogical factors as far as the assets in place, dynastic aristocratic families that are very much members of the power cabal behind the scenes. These are unelected representatives. They decide our fate in closed private rooms, unbeknownst to the general public. And the Donald Trumps of the world go out there and they try to present these dystopian agendas in a way that's packaged enough to manufacture consent, and achieve that sort of subconscious facilitation of said agenda, which is always self-defeating. So that plays perfectly into Columbine in terms of just the dystopian outcome, right? And even the Columbine effect, the psychological manifestation of kind of introducing school shootings into the subconscious minds of the general public, and really disrupting because I think we talked about serial killers a couple episodes ago, or at some point, I know we did, I
Oh,
think,
we
and
definitely have. They're
yeah,
they're one of no, they're like it's why I like talking about this stuff because I've always said like and I'm always talking about like serial killers and school shooters in the sort of like pop culture understood way of like a weird dude who just kills a bunch of people for either no reason or it's like an Ed Gein or an Ed Gein. Well, Ed Gein wasn't a serial killer, but he did do a lot of fucked up shit. Or like Dahmer, who had there's like a not vague, but there's like a sexual nature to it or whatever.
right.
There's like a lot of there's a lot of knowledge around it, but I think broadly there's not a clear explanation for it. And then of course I stumbled upon Program to Kill, and I go, all right, well, you're the only guy giving an explanation kind of for like why this is happening. It is an interesting thing. And all this stuff's very, very interesting because it's like I think when we're talking about it, people don't we've kind of, I've tried to talk to people about it, and it's interesting how it doesn't spark more curiosity in people, because I think it's so complex that people just throw their hands up and go, people are just fucking crazy, dude. I don't know what to tell you. And yeah, I just think there's more to it than just that. It's all very fascinating. And this was the thing too, that like, besides just I like talking to you in general, but why the Columbine topic was so interesting, because I was listening to your episode, and then it's like at the 2 hour mark, I just hear the name David McGowan, and I go, "No, this one too," which
Right.
I think is an interesting place to start, because I like to give people a little bit of the give people a little bit of the end to kind of hook them on the whole conversation in general. So I guess sort of whatever it is is like the like when you did your Columbine episode, were you trying to make sort of a broad statement about the thing, saying this works into Program to Kill, or are you just kind of being like, hey man, this is a bunch of weird shit? Like, what's the overall statement you were kind of trying to make with your Columbine episode?
Yeah, so I kind of am under the impression that this was a consequence of modern gladio, the strategy of tension, utilizing motion arousing violent false flags, which doesn't mean that people weren't effectively killed, obviously, in a false flag, but if it wasn't sort of operationally speaking, achieved in that way, then yeah, it very much seems to be a layered operation that had multiple kill teams that were present that very day. And I think there's even surveillance camera footage overhead that shows one of the SWAT teams, which not necessarily under the impression that they were all members of the SWAT unit, but still, they're blindly firing into the cafeteria after the shooters were allegedly killed and had killed themselves. Of course, is the official narrative, but that's very, I'm very skeptical on that as well. But I will say that it feels as if this was very much a green light go operation to effectively achieve this kind of one. There's always this long-standing policy of an attempt to kind of encourage the American public to essentially engage in the manufacturing of consent to really uh, essentially support landmark gun legislation to effectively disarm themselves, right? And I think that is always a part of the play. But then also, I believe that Columbine, as the school itself, is potentially a longstanding operational sort of clandestine hub that they can kind of leverage whenever they see fit. And I believe that is in regard to the intelligence footprint in the area of Littleton itself. And I think there's so many other geographical hubs where you have this kind of safe community in a way play out, where instead of a safe house for CIA operatives, you have an entire community with individuals from the intelligence apparatus who have retired into this community and effectively are still working on behalf of the intelligence, as far as the military industrial complex, which is definitely a part of Littleton itself. Obviously, Lockheed and Martin, they had developed this major essentially it's very interesting to see how long standing. I believe it was in the 50s when they first sort of gained this major footprint in the area geographically that is Littleton. But I kind of described it, I think it was an individual by the name of, it was when I was watching Bill Cooper, but then I also discovered this guy Chris Graves, who was he did an interview with Charlie
Heard that
Robinson.
guy. Who is that?
Yeah, I don't know too much about him other than when I heard him on this interview with Charlie Robinson. I don't know, a couple years ago. He actually covered Columbine in that episode, and he described it as Littleton effectively being, as far as the town itself, a safe community instead of a CIA safe house. The entire town of Littleton was effectively acting as a safe community. So this would make sense why you have FEMA communication vans on the ground, the at least almost instantly, in terms of running the communications between law enforcement as they responded allegedly to the shooting. You have a lieutenant, I believe Lieutenant Colonel, some ridiculous. I'll pull his name in a moment because he was actually in charge of the communications on the ground as well. So you have this military presence that's effectively there at Columbine during the response, and that's not at all status quo or in any real way. This was definitely an extraordinary circumstance, and so I just find it kind of, I don't know, important to at least understand that the town itself, I believe it was, there were around 35,000 actual citizens in the town of Littleton, and I believe over 10,000 were employed with Lockheed Martin. So that in itself is a fascinating
Wait.
statistic, right?
Okay. All right. That's a good place to take a little pause.
Right.
Okay. So Littleton. Wait. What state was this in again?
So this is Colorado, right?
Okay.
And Littleton, Colorado is essentially where the Columbine High School is located, and I believe that this really applied to the surrounding area as well. El Paso County is caught up in this. There are a few other jurisdictions that seem to have been involved in the investigation, as far as like local investigators who were interviewing witnesses and individuals who were affiliated with the Trenchcoat Mafia and were providing statements on the record about Eric and Dylan, who Eric
Okay.
Harris and Dylan Klebold obviously were the two disaffected teenagers who allegedly committed this shooting as sole perpetrators.
And according to Gus Van Sant, very gay.
Very good, yeah.
Yeah, we talked about that through direct message because I saw you put out the episode, and it's the
Mhm.
funniest part. If you guys never seen a Gus Van Zant's movie Elephant, which is basically directly about Columbine, just for no
Mhm.
reason, just makes them make out in the beginning of it. He's just like, so yeah, this horrific school shooting happened. Also, they're gay boys. You're like, all right, man. I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to tell you how to make movies, but that just seems like a weird,
Right.
just weird. But okay, so let's go back to this town. So they're in what was it, Littleton?
Littleton, Colorado.
And
Yeah.
you said there's 30,000 people in it.
It's nuts because if you look at it, I believe it was as far as just going through the history of what Littleton seemed to represent, and it looks as if it was potentially a geographical asset as some sort of Defense Department hub for covert domestic intelligence operations, and so it looks like the entire town was strategically oversaturated with compromised assets and spooks from even the coroner to the police chief to investigating officers, as I had mentioned, who were helping in the cover up as far as just facilitating it. And
Now you said there was like 10,000 people who work for
yeah,
Lockheed Martin. Was there like a Lockheed Martin facility here though?
yes, yeah,
Okay.
there was an intercontinental missile factory in a secluded canyon in Littleton that the Pentagon ordered for construction in the late 1950s to allegedly combat the Soviet threat, right, in some sort of way, which is always the Gladio playbook for as far as their justification. That was the reason for the stay behind networks post World War II. It was essentially to combat the formidable Soviet threat looming large, you know, and so it's very interesting to see that 35,000. So it looks like we're it was only 35,000 citizens in Littleton, but it was 10,000 employees were manned as far as or were tasked with building these unmanned rockets and satellites for telecommunications and space exploration, as well as classified military projects. So it
Okay.
looks like, yeah, instantly you have the classified project connection, which I think is very interesting, and it effectively indicates Littleton as a company town of Lockheed Martin. And so you have all of these projects under the purview of the National Reconnaissance Office. Now that's important because I feel like so many domestic operations are sort of in this, at least historically. There was always a naval intelligence factor, seemingly back in let's say the JFK Watergate days, right? There was always a deep connection to naval intelligence attaches. Very interesting, affiliation to what I think was an upper echelon as far as just individual assets being read in on the ultimate agenda, and at least within the context of certain avenues of what they were operationally intended to achieve. So I think there's no doubt that the National Reconnaissance Office has kind of been employing this long-standing strategy and controlling the outcome in many of these geographical areas and hubs that you can look to, such as Littleton. So it's also important to mention that Lockheed Martin has a major role in managing the Oak Ridge National Laboratory, which is obviously where so many different scandalous events have transpired in terms of mind control and also developing chemical warfare to then utilize within the context of let's say false flag domestic terror operations, even the anthrax scare there after 9/11, which was very clearly a manufactured crisis because that was traced back to the laboratory, and we all know at this point that it was domestically driven and it was an operation that was effectively greenlit to help reinforce and manufacture consent as far as the official narrative with the Iraq War. And so, oh my God, Saddam and Al Qaeda are sending anthrax in the mail. And in reality, the anthrax was only sent to key priority targets that
Yeah.
that they actually wanted to expose to anthrax, which is fascinating. But it goes to show that you're never safe in the context of
Also,
being among the initiated.
Also, mailing geez, I can't talk. Mailing anthrax doesn't seem like the if you really want to like get shit done, doesn't seem like the
Mhm.
most like fucking stop being a pussy, fucking poison the water supply, dude. Like,
Yeah,
you know what
for
I
real.
mean? Like, I'm just
I
saying,
mean,
if you really want to be effective, it sounds like
mhm.
you're fucking 1 foot in, 1 foot out.
Oh man,
Uh,
they used to have far more effective strategies, but I feel like they employed more often. But maybe now I think that they've sophisticated these methods to such an extent that the anthrax scare was really much more of a propagandistic tool that they were
feels like it,
hoping.
yeah.
Yeah, they were hoping would really kind of leverage the average United States citizen into effectively supporting these policies, really, and also continuing to escalate that feeling of psychological fear that they hope to ratchet up at all times. So you're always in this state of heightened state of emotional just if you're in a heightened emotional state, then you already have lost your ability to critically think through anything. So that in itself is sort of a victory. But
Well, and it does feel like that sometimes because it always feels like there's a lot of dudes because like I didn't want to I joke all the time because people are like, oh, you're into I never wanted to be this guy. I never wanted to be this guy. I just wanted to be a
right,
dude who chills and is left alone. But then you start realizing you're like, nah, they're not gonna leave you alone. And like
no,
it really does, it does feel like there's always there's like these um, it's one of my favorite things I've heard Tripoli say. Like he says there's like a predator class. And it
yeah,
does feel like there's just a type of human being, like because you experience this in normal life. They're not like whether it's the elites or just normal people. There's a type of person who's just like they look around and they see people chilling and they're just like, well, we can't have this.
right.
And it does seem like there's a group of people that are just trying to like low level fuck your day up like that and shit like that. So I don't know. That's
No
why that
doubt.
stuff kind of registers to me, and it makes sense to a degree.
Oh yeah, and consider the aspect of just as far as the timing of Columbine, the date itself, right? It was basically Hitler's birthday, anniversary of Waco and OKC,
Mm.
right? So this is an effective date that
What
would help kind of implement that very psychological manifestation of the Columbine effect phenomena.
what year was it again?
1999.
Oh yeah. It was later than I realized. Okay,
Hmm.
so let's get back to this town because
Yeah.
I do want to get I didn't even think about it. See, that's why I like talking to you because it's like I didn't even think about it from this perspective on like zooming out like this.
Hmm.
Um, but like, okay, so 10,000 people work for Lockheed Martin, but there is a a facility there, so it's like that's why. But you said outside of just that, there was like a lot of CIA agents and connections. Like, let's get into that a little bit because that sounds super interesting.
I think the way that that really presents itself is through the Sedalia, Colorado complex that is, I believe, 14 miles from Littleton, and so it's around 21-minute drive or something to that effect. And this is the hub, the strategic headquarters of the what is known as the, I believe, the White Eagle Underground, because it's strange. I get there are like three different versions of this organization that all kind of feed into each other. One being the White Eagle Lodge is sort of the origin story of what became the Brotherhood of the White Temple, which is effectively facilitating the White Eagle Underground, which is the overall umbrella network. So it's very interesting to. I had no idea, buddy, what I was going
Yeah,
to stumble onto. And this is another thing. Whenever I covered these subjects, I try to go in with, yes, I have some sort of kind of preconceived notion of what I think potentially happened, but in no way am I going in to effectively achieve that as the, avenue of the alternative theory that I'm presenting, right? Because
yeah,
I'm really trying to be far more open minded whenever I discuss any of this, and see where it leads me. And that's as far as just my research regarding the subject. So I had no idea that there was going to be this direct connection to the Star Chamber and the White Eagle Underground, and these very what look to be these white supremacist Aryan ideological organizations of neo Nazis, essentially, who are deeply entrenched and in league with that of the Trenchcoat Mafia, which have all of these various factions in the area, the local area of Colorado and Denver as well, and they all have various names, some of which apparently the Trenchcoat Mafia faction in Littleton were far more interested in violence at being a sort of solution that they would pursue.
So let's talk about the wait. Let's talk. I want to talk about the trip. Oh, sorry, it's just so many.
You're good, buddy.
This is why I like doing the interviews. This is why I like doing, dude. It's so funny to like listen to your podcast, and you'll be like,
Mhm.
"Oh, what happened at Columbine?" And then I'll be like doing stuff, and you know, like sometimes you zone out and you're not like aggressively listening, and then you zone back in. I just hear your voice just being like, just talking about stuff like that, and you're like, and that's the clandestine, blah blah blah, and the MK Ultra, and I'm like, wait, what the fuck just happened? Is this still? I was like, is this still the same podcast? It's so okay. So we got the Trenchcoat Mafia, the White Eagle, something or other. You said,
Mhm.
and sorry, I'm not being. I'm just there's a lot of
No,
info.
you're good, buddy. Yeah, it's a lot
So
of names
so
too.
you're talking because first off, I want to address the Trenchcoat Mafia because like whenever you get into Columbine, you just assume it was a group of high school kids who are
Yep.
like a bunch of incels with a dorky like club name. But
Mhm.
like from how it sounds, how you're talking, it's actually a much bigger thing. But you're saying there was like a Trenchcoat Mafia, the White Eagle group, those like couple others you said. Like, what was it? There was a bunch of these like militia groups or whatever in like the Colorado area just doing
Yes.
background illegal shit?
Yes. So I and what's very strange to me is this seems to open up a connection into, because again, we have an individual by the name of Wade Michael Page that plays into this as well, and I think he himself represents that of a modern Gladio operative that was basically given this path of the sheep dipped patsy in a way, who would effectively be hung out to dry years later in 2012, just after the Aurora, Colorado Cinema 16 Dark Knight shooting that James Holmes allegedly as the sole perpetrator. It's just a laughable story once you dig into that, obviously. But at the same time, this individual was trained, Wade Michael Page, and so he's stationed at Fort Bragg as late as 1998, training as a psychological operations specialist. And then he is given this ridiculous cover story for his general discharge, in my opinion, which seems very much like the path of the sheep dipped patsy. And that is, he is given a general discharge for allegedly drinking on post while he was on duty at Fort Bragg. And so he was abusing alcohol while on post. So he's given a general discharge in 98, a few months before Columbine actually happens. And then where does he end up? He resurfaces just after leaving Fort Bragg as a psychological operations specialist in Littleton, Colorado,
Okay.
4.6 miles from the Columbine High School, 4.6 miles from the Blackjack Pizza restaurant where Dylan and Eric both worked, and all of the members of the Trenchcoat Mafia in the area were effectively meeting and gathering at this Blackjack Pizza restaurant.
Mhm.
And also, it seems as if he was only, I believe, 6 miles from Eric Harris's home. And so, to me, he provides us with an avenue in terms of the window into a modern Gladio operative, because obviously he was a member of the Western Hammerskins, which is this neo-Nazi white supremacist movement, basically that he was touring all of these kind of public events that they were having, these concerts, right, for basically these white supremacist Aryan concerts that he was going to, these festivals, music festivals, and he was going all over the country at that point. But he had a financier named Todd Blodgett, and it just completely boggled my mind that this connection came into that of Columbine, because Wade Michael Page, again, I believe he was one of the members of the actual hit teams that were actively, because there were multiple teams of shooters at Columbine, in my opinion. As far as so many of the witness accounts claim, there were up to a dozen shooters.
Right.
Uh,
There was actual various eyewitness accounts saying there was like multiple people shooting in the school.
exactly, and it's crazy to me because we were we were talking about just the Littleton connection there, obviously, because I think it's very interesting just to mention the fact that there was a prior there was this individual by the name of Carl Raschke, right, who was he himself was a professor at Denver University and specialized in teenage cults. And he had claimed, because this is an indication of possible foreknowledge, right, by the federal authorities, and he had claimed that federal agents were on high alert for some kind of attack on Monday, April 19th, but failed to act on any of the warnings that they received, right? And apparently, obviously the shooting happens the following day, but just understanding that it was originally planned for April 19th, but was pushed back for a day, then that kind of does make sense, as far as like if they're trying to last minute make sure they have every single asset in a position that they would need to effectively control the outcome of this event. I mean, it reminded me of Uvalde as well, as far as the parents being held and detained essentially at a park nearby, not allowed to obviously venture toward the school in any real way. And I
Yeah,
just
they like jacked up that one mom trying to get in.
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
it just instantly I just thought of you know it's really important, I think, to also realize that I had mentioned Wade Michael Page. I guess I should finish that brief connection, because it is fascinating, the Todd Blodgett kind of
Was this
tie-in.
and this was the
What?
gentleman you brought up earlier that got stationed close to the school and the pizza place, you said?
Yes,
And wait,
yes, exactly.
who was that guy in contact? Was he a dude in the mainstream narrative, or is he just a behind the scenes guy?
Well, he would later on essentially make a name for himself in 2012, just after the Aurora, Colorado cinema shooting, when he shoots up the Sikh, the Sikh Wisconsin Sikh temple, and essentially, I believe he was the Sikh temple shooter in 2012, just
Oh,
a
he
couple weeks
became a
after
shooter.
he became a shooter, and
Okay.
actually was killed by they claim he shot himself, but yeah, it very much seemed like he could have been even psychologically programmed to a certain level, and this could have
Mm,
been some sort of dream state like that he was potentially in, as far as very similar to that of Sirhan describing seeing targets in front of his eyes and believing he was at the shooting range whenever he was triggered by Elaine Neal, the woman in the polka dot dress, who basically
mm,
leans up, touches him on the neck, whispers something in his ear. So you have the triggered, code word that she's going to obviously whisper into his ear, which will help trigger the original layer of programming. But also they kind of overwhelm your sensory input by effectively combining this strategic playbook of this perfect recipe involving a scent, a specific scent I believe that they utilize this is why sensory deprivation is a factor in mind control as a sophisticated method. And I believe it's due to the fact that they want to implement this kind of trigger mechanism, which will help additionally trigger the layers of programming, which will lead them to a far more suggestible place where they will then be in that said dream state, committing the crime unbeknownst to them. And so that's what it seems like happened with Elaine Neal, because you have the visual component of the polka dot dress, you have the coffee that is the only thing he could remember, because he saw her. The last thing he could remember, he's sitting out in his car in the parking lot, and then he sees Elaine Neal, the woman in the polka dot dress, and then he follows her into the pantry, and all he remembers is coffee, coffee, coffee. Right. And so something could have been some sort of, chemical recipe of some kind, some sort of, obviously you would have to imagine they would have a formula to help trigger this sort of outcome. But I would think that there would be a pharmaceutical agent that they would utilize in that coffee potentially. And so not only do you have that factor playing in, but also the visual component of the polka dot dress, the scent that Elaine Neal was wearing, that would also help with that sensory input. And then the trigger word, I believe, is important, and the touch as well, as far as touching his neck. I think all of those things will help trigger this individual who has long been placed into these hypnotic trances and in this dissociative state, and it's subliminally programmed through all of these various methods. So that's what seems like happened. And in every way, I would definitely believe that Wade Michael Page could have had prior, as far as just being at Fort Bragg and being trained as a psychological operations specialist. That in itself, I feel like, man, each and every one of these people, like understanding the Green Beret program, of how each and every one of the highest level of the upper echelon of the Green Berets were exposed to these behavioral modification experimentation methods. That's why Tim McVeigh was going to that dentist's office so frequently, because he was basically, one, they were reinforcing his programming at a certain level, and two, he had essentially been given a microchip in his molar, and he believed that, obviously when Dr. Jolly West came and visited him, I think that he potentially convinced
Jolly
him.
West visited McVeigh?
Yeah, before he
Come
died,
on.
before he was given lethal injection.
Bro, I haven't finished Aberration Heartland of Real. Spoiler alert.
I'm sorry, buddy.
No, I'm fucking with you.
No, it's just the same story of Jack Ruby, right? He goes and visits Jack Ruby.
Jolly West. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait. Jolly West visited McVeigh. Shut the fuck up.
Oh yeah,
Come on,
dude.
man.
Yes. And just after that is when McVeigh was certain, he was convinced that he would be given a counter a pharmaceutical agent that would counter the lethal injection, and he would be saved by his handlers. And that essentially he spent the rest of his time for his public execution. He spent all that time while he was incarcerated trying to leverage his defense attorneys to basically make it to where his father would never be able to perform an autopsy on his body. And so that's very, obviously that's suspect as hell.
Fucking
and
insane.
Raised all the red flags. But yeah, and so it makes a lot of sense to me that, and obviously I thought of Jack Ruby because clearly he's intended to, he was claiming he was going to tell the story essentially and blow the lid off of what really happened there with JFK. And just before he was set to testify, Jolly West came in.
He shows up, and then Ruby's just fucking weird as shit now.
Yeah, he basically had a psychological break that he could not return from, and had no prior history of any of this sort of psychological behavior patterns that would make sense of this. And so it seems like and this was he said I believe when he testified, he said he heard screams outside his cell. And he yelled at them, "Don't you know they're killing Jews?" He believed that they were executing Jews in the Holocaust outside of his cell. That's how scared he was.
He thought the Holocaust. Damn, can you imagine? Can you imagine being a Jew in the 60s thinking the Holocaust is right outside your door?
That's what, after Jolly West visited him, he was hiding under a table.
That's crazy.
That's how much he was psychologically triggered in terms of I think they have these methods that they've been able to deploy upon individual, priority targets where they can force you to have a psychological break through this sort of exposure, and it's fascinating, man. But I will say
Yeah.
that I believe there's a direct connection to Wade Michael Page and the Trenchcoat Mafia,
Okay,
and
yeah,
and
good. Let's go back. Yeah, let's go back to him. So again, in context of Columbine, who is this gentleman again? You said he was at Fort Bragg,
yes,
and he was doing the psychological.
operations specialist, yes.
Okay, and so how does he get? So he's how does he get to Columbine?
Yeah, he just shows up in Littleton in '98 just after he gets the general discharge, which again, perfect placement in terms of it reminded me of Tim McVeigh at Waco passing out pamphlets. I'm like,
Yeah.
"What's going on here?"
Well,
This
I
does
mean, I'm sure housing prices were cheaper, dude. He just probably had a good deal or something.
Yeah, I'm sure,
Okay,
I'm
okay.
sure.
So he just sorry, I'm such a dumbass. I was like, so here, what's the logical explanation? You're like, no, we don't do that here. Uh, okay, so he
Oh,
shows up.
man.
And then how does he interact in the context of how does he interact with Columbine?
Okay. So this basically the implication here is a very well established group of white supremacist neo-Nazi accelerationists, merchants of death is how I describe them,
Mm,
and they're clearly in my mind in this context a part of a wider network that infiltrated and oversaturated with these cheap dipped psychological warfare operatives who are seemingly involved in Columbine and so Wade Michael Page. Now, remember, August 5th, 2012, he fatally he shoots 6 people and wounds 4 others before allegedly committing suicide at the Gurdwara Sikh Temple in Oak Creek, Wisconsin. And so, Wade Michael Page, he's armed with a 9 millimeter, a semi-automatic pistol, and he decides to, according to multiple witnesses, they first reported 4 white males dressed in all black carrying out a well-coordinated mass murder attack involving tear gas. So that was initially the claim of witnesses on the ground at the Sikh temple shooting. So again, not quite certain. I haven't done the deep dive into this specific case, but I very much am already skeptical, from the outside looking in, especially understanding who Wade Michael Page was. But when the
yeah,
police arrived, Wade Michael Page allegedly shoots one of the responding officers 8 times in the parking lot, and then he's shot in the stomach and by an additional officer, I guess, and then that's when he fatally shoots himself in the head. So 4 people were killed inside the temple. 3 people, including Page, died outside. So he was born and raised in Colorado. So you can have that connection right away. So maybe he just got the general discharge from playing devil's advocate, right? He received
sure.
the general discharge and then goes
Going
back
back
home,
home.
yeah, to Colorado and relocates. But here's the problem. If you can believe it, he actually went to school, high school in Littleton, right? And so it
Yeah.
makes sense, right? Nine News found Wade's name listed in a Littleton High School yearbook for 1987 twice, in Arapahoe County High School, or in Arapahoe High School's yearbook for 1989 and 1990 as well. So his last name happened to be different at the time. He was Wade Van Buskirk. So
Mm,
yeah, Wade Michael Page is definitely rolls off the tongue a little better if you want to become a mass shooter later on in life. But
yeah.
at the same
Well,
time,
you have to go by 3 names if you want to kill a bunch of
I know
people
I'm
in one
actually
day.
concerned that I go by Austin Wade Picard as far as just my middle name. Like,
Yeah,
yeah.
Austin, you're just walking around your house, like touching yourself in different places to make sure you're not a Manchurian candidate.
Dude, I'm like in the shower. I'm like, are they triggering the radio EMF, electromagnetic frequency systems, man?
That would be the biggest bitch of all of it, where it's like you're the Manchurian candidate guy, and you actually end up, but you're like, God damn,
They
they
got
got me
me.
too. Fuck.
For real though. But man, what's so crazy about this guy's connections is that he was, as I mentioned, an army vet, right? Served from April 92 to October 98. And Page had apparently he was this is very strange, by the way, because you have his ASVAB test. He scored like extraordinarily high, right? And I believe that the ASVAB test in itself was a product of MK Ultra because it was Sidney Gottlieb's protege who actually designed this test, and I think that it effectively would help with, let's just say, identifying the perfect character profile that would, just lend, just let's just say, if you fit this perfect character profile, then obviously you would be on the short list for kind of being tapped into an upper echelon of domestic
Yeah.
operations in a clandestine, covert way.
It's
It's the
it's
same.
like when you're in yeah, it's like when you're in 5th grade and the basketball coach sees the fucking 7 foot tall 5th grader. They're like,
Yeah,
well, that guy's playing basketball.
exactly.
Yeah, it's like when fucking I don't know if you ever like the Pam Anderson story. She was just hot at a hockey game, and they're like, do you want to be a model for yeah, people see you and go, oh, this first person's perfect for this.
Exactly. And so they claim that the ultimate purpose of this personality assessment system was to describe traits and predict behavior for MK Ultra mind control and military intelligence purposes. So take the ASFAB, which all of us are forced to do in the context of public school, at least where I grew up. I had to take the ASFAB, which is very strange. And
Wait, we all had to take that?
I did, but I grew up in Northwest Arkansas in the Bible Belt, so that definitely could have been a different policy. But I definitely remember that essentially I wasn't given an option, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's very strange. They had like uh, some sort of a day that they isolated for this purpose. It was very strange, but
Oh
anyway,
shit.
so the score for psychological operations specialist is higher than a US military counterintelligence applicant. So it looks like he was definitely among this exclusive group. Again, reminds me of Tim McVeigh, who describes the sheep dip story to his sister, right, and explains that among this group of Green Berets, he was called out by his essentially his social security number, and some of the more exclusive individuals who did score extraordinarily high were also kind of isolated and tapped to become a part of some sort of clandestine domestic operation that they were that they had, I guess, qualified for in this context. So that is when I believe he kind of was tapped to infiltrate the right wing militia groups and things of that nature, which is another huge, obviously understanding PACCON as a clandestine operation itself to undermine those militia organizations that were
Yeah.
actually grassroots at the time. So it makes sense, but yeah.
No, dude, I never forget those. It's every time the Libertarian Party does the gayest shit in the world, I go, it's just the government infiltrating it. That's why it's not us, it's the government.
Exactly. Dude, what's
Yeah.
hilarious is I actually the other day I was just kind of, I don't know, growing more and more frustrated with the infighting and seeing, it's just like it feels to me
Yeah.
like there's so many unnecessary disputes that happen, and conflict.
It's like, yeah, it's just focusing on gay little squabbles
Yeah.
and whoever wants to be the man and not, ignoring the bigger
And
picture.
in no way is it appealing to the outside, individual who is not at all affiliated or understands any of the philosophy or principles, and
Oh, dude, the recent infighting, I was like, I didn't know you guys could make us look like bigger fucking dorks.
exactly, man. I'm like,
Like, I didn't know.
what are we
It's
doing?
crazy.
Wasting our
Yeah.
time, and
Also, if you're gonna, if I always make this statement, libertarians know they completely understand the free market until it's time to look in the fucking mirror, and
exactly.
it's like I'll just say this plain and clear. If you're mad that someone isn't, you think you're better at messaging than them, just be better at it then.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you don't need to make a 3-hour video about why you don't like them. You just have to just be better than them.
Exactly. Yeah, the takedowns they're so strange to me. And again, I feel like some of it is ego driven, in a way. Yeah.
1000%.
But I will say that I was proud of myself. I wish it was actually on the show that I said this. Because after Already Dead, like a couple weeks ago, I was talking to Jacob and I was just like, Hey, the perfect example of what happens when you utilize the state as a tool to legitimately accomplish some sort of positive change in the system itself. You ultimately elect a gay man to represent your moral values. I was just like, that's who's running the Libertarian Party now, right?
Yeah,
Is a legitimate gay man, which is just like hilarious to me you know, it clearly points to that very notion of infiltration. And I mean, who was the individual? Was it Sarwalk? I'm trying to remember now who ran the LP for a little while and was obviously a tool of the Clinton Foundation and had these ties back to obviously the Clinton administration and was clearly there to disrupt the message of that of the Libertarian Party and also
yeah.
harm the credibility and the appeal. And so in every way, I view engaging in the system itself to effectively achieve change is really just you're missing the boat philosophically in
Well,
my mind.
well, I think, yeah, and I think if you do engage, because it's hard not
Yeah,
to, I think it's like it's useful to try to undermine it as much as possible.
definitely.
Because I think I always go. It's why I give Alex Jones prop because I actually do think Infowars is probably one of the best show titles
Oh, I
because it
love
is
it.
kind of that.
Mhm.
It is kind of that because it's like people be, it's the more you learn, you start to realize like if you just because I think I noticed it like when COVID happened and they were like, you guys have to do this, and then a lot of religious organizations were like, yeah, you're not bigger than God, so no.
Right.
And it is a thing of like once you solidify a belief in you, it's like no policy can really, nothing more than like the threat of physical violence can like sort of get in the way of that.
Exactly.
And so it is a thing of like once you get people sort of locked in on a fucking thing, then that's when I feel like you can really put forth change. So that's why I'm a big fan of undermining legitimacy
Yeah.
in things that aren't legitimate, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And I definitely I would say I'm very disillusioned by the political process, and I believe that the institutions have been entirely compromised and corrupt from their infancy, from day one. They were essentially, you know, they were created by the most sinister, let's just say, if you realize that the opium wars effectively funded the rise of America's institutions, including Yale University and some of the most exclusive university structured school systems that exist in modern day that are effectively disrupting our fabric as far as our just kind of the fabric of moral fabric of society. And I mean, just understanding the creation of the Skull and Bones secret fraternal organization, it's a German death cult, and not understanding that this is really, I believe that even the U.S. itself is sort of a product of it's kind of an extension of the really the British royal families. If you kind of tie this back to the Pilgrim Society and the Anglo-American establishment, there's no way that this wasn't entirely a sort of dystopian outcome from day one in terms of the American dream, the city on a hill. In reality, all of that was really effectively a psychological operation, to kind of create this false notion in the minds of the American public, when in reality it was always compromised. And I think understanding that the vast majority of the leadership from just generational has very much been insulated from any accountability as well. So I just don't believe in engaging with the institutions as a kind of plausible avenue for change in any real way,
Yeah.
because I view them as entirely compromised. So, yeah, I just feel like they're very much more kind of strategically conditioning the public to embrace this outcome in more ways
Dude,
than
I
one.
think that's a big part of it because you were saying before, like, I had this realization a while ago. It's like the American dream is actually kind of a trap
Yeah,
where, like, and it's how you kind of like stay locked in and let all this like bad shit happen because you're you're focused on this like hypothetical end result.
Right.
And so it actually trains you to ignore things that, like, I see it all the time in comedy. You'll see certain comedians who are like, they'll talk one way and you see them in private and it's like, oh yeah, you're doing that because you don't want to fuck up this and that opportunity. And it's like, yeah, a lot of people do that in every facet of life, where it's like you have this specific end goal in mind and you basically just tune out things that are going to hurt you from getting there.
Yeah.
Which, and it's kind of funny, man, because it's like it's making me have like a whole different perspective on life, but it's also making me like understand people more, where it's like, oh yeah, this is why you kind of let some shit just slide, sort of like philosophically, because it is like, you're promised this thing in American society when you're younger, and it's like you feel like you don't get that if you acknowledge certain aspects of reality and shit. And yeah, it's like there needs to be this whole sort of, I don't know, man, psychological or philosophical fucking shift in everyone, where I forget what fucking movie it was, but it's that one movie where the dude's putting on the glasses and it's like, oh, everyone's a zombie.
Oh,
but like
yeah.
literally, I always forget what that one's called. But it's like, it feels like there could be this like shift that almost jolts people out of it to go like, oh fuck, well, maybe not a jolt, but something slowly over time.
You know what
But
I
yeah,
actually read the other day, it's been quite a while now, but it was so convincing when I was reading through it, and it was David Livingstone is this journalist, and I believe he's clearly using a pseudonym of some kind, but at the same time, I think he's had a conversation with William Ramsey, and I've intended to actually go back and listen to that for quite a while, because I haven't actually been introduced to him as a person. I've just read his work, right? And so, but I find it very interesting, because there was an article he had written that he titled America, and he begins it with a chapter labeled Sacred Destiny. And it fully convinced me that essentially of what in a way, it just reinforced something that I already sort of felt to be true. And basically that was that the fleeing members of the British colony who obviously fled to North America in the 17th century to settle, and as far as these Englishmen fleeing persecution at home, right, allegedly, in reality, they supported what was to be known as a holy experiment, or as I mentioned, a city upon a hill. And this success would prove that God's plan could be successfully realized in the American wilderness. Ultimately, their efforts inspired their successors to establish the legacy of secularism in the United States, permanently separating church and state in order to avoid the same persecutions their predecessors had endured. In reality, the founding of America was a Rosicrucian mission, inspired by Campanelli's City of the Sun and Francis Bacon's New Atlantis, to set up a haven where they would be free to practice their heretical views. To understand the Masonic perspective of this history, Manly P. Hall in The Secret Destiny of America explained, Bacon quickly realized that here in the New World was the proper environment for the accomplishment of his great dream, the establishment of the philosophic empire. It must be remembered that Bacon did not play a lone hand. He was the head of a secret society, including in its membership the most brilliant intellectuals of his day. All these men were bound together by a common oath to labor in the cause of a world democracy. Bacon's Society of the Unknown Philosophers included men of high rank and broad influence, and together with Bacon, they devised the colonization scheme. As explained by Pike, the goal of Freemasonry is to fulfill the end times prophecies of the Book of Revelation. That mission, according to occultists like Manly P. Hall, is the fulfillment of a universal plan. It is also known as the Great Work, an alchemical term for the process of working with the prima materia to create the philosopher's stone. It has been used to describe personal and spiritual transmutation in the Hermetic tradition, believed to have been preserved over the centuries by the predecessors of Freemasonry, the Templar Knights, and the Rosicrucians. It is interpreted from the esoteric teachings of the Jewish mystical tradition of the Kabbalah, according to which this fulfillment will come from a resolution of all opposites. leading to order out of chaos. The Masonic dictum. That
See,
right
this
there, I
is
was like, I'm sorry, but that is so convincing in terms of
yeah.
the actual foundation of America being this Rosicrucian mission and a true dystopian outcome from day one, and occultists layering in this agenda to be fully embraced by that of the low frequency general public that can't quite engage with critical in a way utilizing critical thinking skills, and are so conditioned to fall into these preordained outcomes and these well laid traps of ideological subversion. So if you subscribe to these long-standing ideological prisons, then you've been had. You've been conditioned to legitimately facilitate the dystopian outcome that will become this sort of international framework. And you can call it what you want, but the New World Order is it just seems far more credible than ever. And just seeing so many different usual suspects legitimately use the terminology, it's impossible to dismiss. And so I get the conspiratorial nature of the term New World Order, and people feeling like they should almost distance themselves from that, in a way. But I kind of refuse to do that at this point, because it's all that I see is this
Yeah.
long-standing agenda being facilitated at every level, and utilizing the demoralization process of these extraordinary news cycles to help manufacture consent for that very preordained outcome. So I believe this was the colonization
It does.
scheme.
It does feel like that because, like, the one thing I always was very like tuned in on, the more I started learning about history and stuff like that, is like, it's like I was learning, it's this thing when you learn about certain things, and it's like there's certain stuff that's like, up for opinion. But it was like when I started to learn about like financial stuff and like how money works and shit like that.
Right.
And you start seeing how, they just so crazily will just be like printing up money and going haphazardly, and how they just throw it's like the way they throw caution to the wind. And you're like, okay, you guys know, like, how to do this right to a degree. You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
how to do it right to a degree. And it's like, there's been so much history of like, well, yeah, just don't do that. Like, it's like almost the thing of like, yeah, just don't do that thing again over and over again. And you're like, because I was trying to talk to someone about this. I was just like, I get fascinated with the fact that like nothing gets better. And I want to be clear, because first off, whenever you go nothing gets better, someone will be like, hey man, we got like fucking, you can watch fucking YouTube in your pocket like that. And you're like, no, I know technology's better. Like,
Yeah,
you know what I
exactly.
mean?
Mhm.
I'm just saying it's like the age old, like fucking, Dave Smith made a great point one time where he's like, you just would think at one point people would like just stop bombing the absolute fuck out of each other.
Right.
Because it's like, I remember I got to a point learning about war and world history where I'm like, dude, there's so many conflicts that would be avoided if people just had a conversation about it.
Mhm.
And you're like, it's shocking that like it's shocking that they wouldn't just not immediately go to mass murder on things. And and it's why I am more open to the secret societies and stuff, where it's like, it does feel like there's this force out there constantly pushing it towards a direction of chaos.
Yeah.
And it's, again, as a dude who likes to chill, it's exhausting, guys. You know what? I'll meet you guys halfway, just a little less.
Exactly.
Can we just do a little, you know what I mean? A little less.
Mhm.
Like, it is funny too. It's also very revealing how greedy they all are. Like all the higher up people who make everything fucking a nightmare.
Mhm.
Is because like 9/11 was the perfect example. When 9/11 happens and everyone goes like, what's that about? What they mad about? And it's like, it's real proof that it's like, brother, if everyone's quality of life is good,
Mhm.
you can do a lot and they won't say shit.
Exactly.
And it's like, brother, you just gotta make you just got to make gas and groceries a little bit cheaper and not make, if someone has a cough, it costs $20,000 fucking dollars.
Right.
If you just did that, so many people would shut the fuck up.
Mhm.
It's mind up. Anyway,
Oh yeah.
we got really far away from Columbine.
Yeah,
I
my
really
bad,
want to
buddy.
go. No. This was very interesting. What was the dude's name again? David Livingston?
David Livingstone. Yeah.
Livingstone. I
Mhm.
really want to. I wrote his name down. I want to check that dude out. That art. You said the article's just called America.
Yes, and
I'm gonna check.
it's fascinating. Honestly, you can go through his archive. Is really one of my favorite sources in terms of he's covered a lot of the background of the genealogical connections to that of many of these individual perpetrators involved in the true power paradigm that plays out in all of these clandestine ways. He really provides a direct window into their connections, and in every way seems credible. And especially, he's the one who wrote the article called Discordia as well, which covers a lot of Carrie Thornley, who created Discordianism, a New Age esoteric occultite organization, and basically was one of the impersonators of Oswald, and that was running domestic clandestine operations on behalf of the CIA with Oswald in Louisiana there. And it's very strange because he's the one who wrote the Idle Warriors, which effectively predicted the exact same kind of path that Oswald would take as far as allegedly defecting to the Soviet Union as a disgruntled Marine, and then coming back to the States in some sort of Soviet plot to assassinate the U.S. president. All of that was written by Carrie Thornley, who was stationed with him at the El Toro military base, right? And he knew Oswald personally, and according to Jim Garrison, who investigated it, he alleged that Carrie Thornley was the impersonator in Louisiana who potentially went to even the Mexican embassy or the Russian embassy in Mexico City, which is very interesting as far as all of the impersonators of Oswald at that point. And then he later on even claims that he was a part of, so he claims he was the half brother of Lee Harvey Oswald, and that they were both products of a Nazi breeding experiment to create Manchurian candidates. And that fits as far as I'm concerned. Admiral Karl Donitz is allegedly Lee Harvey Oswald's father, who briefly replaced Hitler after his fall, after post-World War II, which is very strange. But it turns out there's quite a likeness if you put the two of them together, as far as Lee Harvey Oswald and Admiral Karl Donitz, because it looks as if he could potentially be his child. So if that's the case, especially not as much as we know about Lee Harvey Oswald's father, it makes a lot more sense that this would effectively be the avenue of kind of creating, not only having breeding experiments well in place, but also having these well-established avenues to effectively procure undocumented children for these experimentations, and then also just for avenues of clandestine operational value. And so that alone makes sense, would help distance the family from the outcome, because that's another thing, is if you're essentially a test tube baby, right, in a breeding experiment, then the parents aren't going to be too bogged down in the ultimate sacrifice that you will inevitably right, be forced into, as far as your own personal path in terms of Lee Harvey Oswald and Carrie Thornley. But either way, it's hard to dismiss just due to the level of reality. I mean, a Nazi breeding experiment appears in Columbine, which is insane, and it connects directly back to the Star Chamber, the White Eagle Underground, the Brotherhood of the White.
I mean, that's gotta be the weirdest 6 degrees of separation I've ever heard in my life. Austin, this is why I like talking to you, Austin, because every time I talk to you, I go, "Oh, I've never heard that sentence before."
Oh man,
you always just say it, and I'm like, "All right, well, that's 10 more things I gotta Google now." Okay, so damn, and this is why you're a fucking pro. It's the way you brought that back to Columbine.
Thank you, buddy.
No, that's all. I'm not trying to down, but all that stuff's incredibly fascinating. Right. But yeah, no. So that's great. Nazi breeding experiment was involved in Columbine.
Well,
anyway,
do you mind if I go take a piss real quick, and I'll be right back? Is that cool?
Not at all. This will be a good pause. We'll just have I mean, whatever. This will be on stream. I'll edit this out later. We're not super professional. I was just telling him how fucking you'll be saying some stuff and I'll just be like, what the fuck's going on? What are we talking about? And then but like you and it's what I like about you. You're a receipts man. And I think that's very important in this line of work is you're a big receipts man. And that's why you always have way more credibility than most of these guys.
Thank you, buddy. That was my goal from day one, was that I was very kind of frustrated with the lack of credibility in terms of so many of these alternative theories that I believe to be far more plausible than that of the official narrative. So anytime that, I mean, really it was the ultimate goal, was to bridge that gap and provide a more credible window into a lot of these alternative theories, as I mentioned. So I do think it's important to always come correct as much as you can. Most of the time I'll inevitably go a little schizo and start referencing things that I'm not really, let's just say, prepared to discuss at a very detailed level. So sometimes I won't necessarily make the point as well as I would have liked to, but still, I feel like if anyone were to, follow that avenue of research down the rabbit hole, then they would expose themselves to exactly what I was referencing, and hopefully that would inevitably convince them, right? But who knows? I definitely think that the more you can provide details, then obviously it will only help reinforce these extraordinary kind of circumstances and the evidence that seems to be far more credible and corroborated than people would like to acknowledge as well. But I understand it's difficult to discern for yourself at times because there's so much deliberate manipulation taking place in terms of the media process involved with these scandals. But as I was mentioning, though, to get into the Nazi breeding experiments, I have to actually finish that Wade Michael Page connection, because I do think it's vital in terms of his connection to the Trenchcoat Mafia. And also, one of the individual witnesses who went on the record, he was a student, he was underage, and he went on the record explaining the Trenchcoat Mafia to the investigator. That as well is very important, because it provides this kind of a cult framework for some of the upper echelon of the Trenchcoat Mafia leadership in the area. And basically only a handful, I think up to 25 to 28 or something like that, were actually members and actual initiates of that upper echelon leadership of the TCM. So it makes sense, because apparently that you would have to that they believe, according to this source, this child witness who went on the record with an investigator, they were legitimately they believed they were modern day vampires, and they would have bloodletting ceremonies as far as their initiatory process. And so they would force individuals who would go through the initiation to essentially cut their forearms, right, in this strange sort of blood ritual. And but that blew me away, because I discovered this context of apparently reinforcing these fail safes in mind control programming, and that basically committing self-harm will eliminate the returning memories of your programming. And so essentially there are fail-safe mechanisms installed in the programming at various layers for whenever, because as I've heard it explained many times, there's a shelf life for these Manchurians or any of these programmed individuals. And so there will be a time, if they aren't having their programming reinforced at various levels, and sort of the timing obviously matters as well, then they will effectively wake up to that prior programming. Makes a lot of sense in context with that individual who broke into, and it was in Colorado. He broke into an amusement park after hours. He goes into the restroom at the amusement park, and he writes something very like, I can't recall the exact verbiage that he used, but it was clearly an implication that he didn't want to go through with it, but he had no choice. And so the only way that he effectively could end this sort of a potential outcome was to basically, destroy himself and commit suicide. So he wrote that, or something to that effect, on the mirror in the bathroom, and then committed suicide.
Just like, I don't want,
Right.
just being like, this is how I have to stop it.
Yeah, Like, this is the only way I can stop from
Huh.
actually going through with something like this, so such a sinister thing. Now, who knows how he was sort of waking up to that notion and becoming aware. But I think that that plays into some of these scandals and these cases, that some of them aren't necessarily effectively greenlit, right? And I would say some of them even fail as far as what they're attempting
Well,
to achieve.
actually, speaking of failures, this just popped into my head. Do they have? Are there? Well, I mean, I guess there's reports of homeless people saying everything under the sun, but now I'm just immediately imagining like I immediately had the theory pop in my head. I was like, what if the homeless crisis is just failed MK Ultra experiment?
Hey, there's this one
Hey,
homeless guy that lives at the El Pollo Loco, at least did before it moved. And man,
yeah.
every time we would go to the El Pollo Loco, there this dude was legitimately like, having a full-blown conversation and in conflict with
Well,
fans.
dude, I see,
Yeah.
brother. I'm in Austin. I see it all the time. No, that's the part that gets me is it's like it's one thing when they're just kind of, because you'll meet the homeless people that are kind of with it. They're just like, yeah, I'm just. It's like there's a lot of them that are just like depressed and they have zero self-worth and they're just addicted to drugs. But then there's other ones where you're just like they're having a full-blown conversation with someone and it's like, you just wonder, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? It's like I used to work for Uline, and I would send out 50-gallon drums, and I go, one of these is definitely to dissolve a person in. So it's the same way. I
Mhm.
just wonder. I go, how many of them were they just like, yeah, we fucked them up, and then a windowless van just threw them out on the streets? Like
Right.
you just wonder about it.
Mhm.
But so yeah, you were saying, so there is like a precedent for that stuff with the gentleman writing the stuff on the
Right. Yeah,
mirror
so
and stuff.
but I'll address that, trench coat mafia connection.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, because it is crazy, but, I will say that, it's important to know that obviously Wade Michael Page had ties to that white supremacist neo-Nazi group known as the Western Hammerskins, and, they were formed in, like, '88 in Texas, I think in Dallas, and they were promoting and producing white power rock music, I guess. So that's why he was going to all these music festivals.
Yeah.
And so the Hammerskins were affiliated with this record label known as 9% Productions. And they
Mhm.
were hosting annual concerts, including something called Hammerfest. And I believe he attended that as well. It was some sort of annual event in the US and Europe. And so anyway, it looks like these are one of the best, according to the ADL. The Hammerskins are considered to be one of the best organized neo-Nazi skinhead groups in America. And so then you have an extraordinary level of federal involvement with the group, right, which has been very well documented. And Wade Michael Page, we know for a fact, was in Littleton, Colorado in 1999 when Columbine took place. So we also know that in 2000, with no known source of income, he suddenly leaves Littleton on a cross-country trip, visiting friends and attending these festivals in Georgia, North Carolina, Ohio, West Virginia, and California. And then he even discussed this personally, apparently, when he wrote a statement alleging, just as far as regarding his abrupt departure from Littleton just after Columbine. And he says, I'm originally from Colorado and had always been independent. But back in 2000, I set out to get involved and wanted to basically start over. So I sold everything I owned except for my motorcycle and what I could fit into a backpack and went on a cross country trip visiting friends and attending festivals and shows. I went to Hammerfest 2000 in Georgia, over to North Carolina, up to Ohio, down to West Virginia, and out to California. And that's when I joined Youngland. So this is obviously just very interesting that he's caught up in this white supremacist organization, and then also considering how close in proximity he was to that of Blackjack Pizza, Columbine, and Eric Harris's home. But yeah, there's a mugshot from '99, right, of Wade Michael Page, and the police in Denver refused to release this mugshot, saying the FBI and Wisconsin police asked them not to. So
Hmm.
I think it's more likely that the picture would have shown Wade Michael Page with short, spiky black hair and blonde tips, is apparently what he was sporting at that time. That also happened to be the exact same description as the missing seventh older adult male Columbine shooter, identified by 40 plus witnesses in public court documents. So we
How many witnesses? 40?
over 40 witnesses, yeah, legitimately
Wait,
described
did you say seventh
seventh,
shooter?
because there were now clear and obvious connections to. I mean, I even covered one of the witness statements regarding the third shooter and actually identifying a third shooter, which I found to be interesting, especially because they were no longer even going to Columbine High School, and so it was another strange, obvious connection to involvement outside of the school itself, and
Mhm.
and potentially having additional shooters, obviously, and so I believe there were at least, I think, 6 to 8, I believe, but there could well have been a dozen, and it's just, yeah,
Interesting.
it's insane.
Yeah, and that is a thing too that like um that's like a functionality thing with a lot of this stuff where in the context of Program to Kill that I started to, because I always try to like look at it like from a functional standpoint, and I
Mhm.
started to realize the argument that he's making in a lot of those in all the chapters of that book is basically like one person couldn't have done all this.
Right.
And then when you start, it's like a simple thing like that. Once you start looking at it through that framework, you're like, a lot of them, the one that stuck out was like I think like John Wayne Gacy. You're like,
Oh,
yeah,
man.
that would be hard with one guy. You know what I mean? Like, there's like a bunch of those where you're like, yeah, you know what, that would be real fucking hard with
Oh,
one
yeah.
guy.
You know what's crazy is that I just it was just brought to my attention that there was, because I've been talking about John Wayne Gacy a little bit here and there, and really, I will fully commit at a certain point here in the near future, as far as my next solo project will more than likely be the Odyssey Foundation and the Delta Project, which I believe he was a fundamental part of, and was really
Mm,
just kind of a lower level middle management of some kind that was really in given the task of procuring victims for the network. And I believe he was one of the key individuals who were abducting some of the children, including Johnny Gosch, during the paperboy fetish that was allegedly ordered through Michael Aquino, and that caught up with not only Johnny Gosch but the Jacob Wetterling case, which involves the Oakland County child killers. And it's very interesting because this ties in North Fox Island and the human hunting parties that were being promoted in the pedophile magazine subscription model that they were providing, apparently for individuals who had these sinister sexual proclivities to take advantage of. And so basically, if you could pay to receive a private trip to North Fox Island off the coast of Michigan and engage in a human hunting party with child victims. And so this was essentially being offered by an individual pedophile by the name of Francis Sheldon, who would never be held accountable for this, because he would basically, he had a private jet and he just escaped and went to the Netherlands, which have very strange age of consent laws, obviously, and seem to be a hub for pedophiles to basically remain insulated from accountability and legal action. And so later on, he would even be there were pictures that surfaced of him at a child care organization orphanage where he had little boys just sitting on his lap. So in no way was he ever brought to justice. And it's just disgusting. But how this plays into John Wayne Gacy is that I discovered just recently, there's essentially there's a further Finders connection that I found out in regard to Paul Benassi and John Wayne Gacy, who I already knew that Paul Benassi claimed that John Wayne Gacy was one of the two individuals who abducted Johnny Gosch, the paperboy from Iowa, I believe. And it turns out that what he claimed is that he witnessed himself as a part of the network who was helping procure victims on behalf of the operation, because he himself had been abused in some sort of monarch mind control program where he was traumatized and essentially developed dissociative identity disorder, right? And he implicates Michael Aquino directly. I believe it was Rusty Nelson, the blackmail photographer, who went on record claiming that he witnessed Lawrence E. King from the Franklin scandal, from the Omaha Credit, Nebraska Credit Union, where basically he implicated him and Michael Aquino passing, essentially engaging in some sort of transaction, right, financial transaction on a military base, and effectively he was there to witness it. So it seemed as if this was fundamentally a part of a wider network involved with intelligence and organized crime and these occult organizations to provide plausible deniability, but then also it's just clearly a manifestation of this pedophile underground, right? That is very well established, but also facilitated by the powers that be. And the individuals of prominence within the networks are usually kind of, you know, just usually they infiltrate their cases and they disrupt the wheels of justice, and typically, they skate any real sort of legal outcome. But that's only the more prominent individuals who haven't fully overexposed the network to some degree, because as you do, I think you become obviously what's it called, when you are expendable. You become an expendable asset if you bring attention to the network in this way. And so I think that happens very often. But I believe John Wayne Gacy was a patsy for the wider network, and they kind of hung him out to dry by claiming he was a sole perpetrator, serial killer that killed 33 boys, which that in itself, 33. It seems like even the case of incriminating John Wayne Gacy could have been some sort of occult sacrifice ritual that was playing into the network itself, just to kind of utilize right this strange effective playbook where understanding that Phil Paskey was actually, so John David Norman ran the Odyssey Foundation, right, and this directly connects
What?
to.
I don't know if I've heard. What's the Odyssey Foundation? I don't know if I've heard of that
Okay,
before.
so the Odyssey Foundation was basically, it was a child sex trafficking operation, and it was I believe it was international in scope, very much like the Finders. I don't see much of a
Gotcha. Okay.
distinguishing. Yeah, there's not much distinction between the two operations, because I think they're really an example of the network at large, and so it's really just a window into this underworld, this pedophile underground that is seemingly being facilitated by the intelligence apparatus. So it looks like John David Norman has direct connections to not only John Wayne Gacy, and this is a prolific pedophile that legitimately went to prison for this. And if you look up a picture of John David Norman, it's all day long. There's no way that you would that you would actually reject anything that I'm describing here. The man
Just like
himself,
a pedophile from a mile away.
exactly. And it seems as if what had taken place is that he had become overexposed, because they had these pink index cards that.
Yeah, dude.
Did you see a picture?
100%.
It's
I just
crazy.
want to show. I just want to show the people. I just want to show the people real quick. Like, yeah, dude. I mean, completely.
Is that not insane?
As a great man once said, "Hide your kids, hide your wife." That's
Yeah,
that's not.
exactly.
But anyway, back to it.
Yeah, no, it's honestly incredible how much the Odyssey Foundation it would then evolve and kind of rebrand itself as the Delta Project after he was incriminated and basically went to prison for charges of pedophilia, and and so it's he was convicted many different times between 1960 and 1998 on child molestation and child pornography charges. So there were child porn was directly discovered in a few of the properties connected to John David Norman and Dean Corll in Houston, who was the Candyman killer, who allegedly killed all those boys as well. When in reality, he was just as much of a John Wayne Gacy type, in my opinion, who were obviously, they had these strange sexual proclivities they wanted to take advantage of. So that would lead them into being a vital asset in the network itself, but really also offer them, a kind of avenue into procuring victims for themselves as well. So, it's kind of beneficial on both sides. They're coexisting for this very purpose. And so when John David Norman goes away, right, for because again, he has an associate by the name of Phil Paskey, right? And it's fascinating because this extends not only to Dallas but also to Chicago. So I think the Chicago mob was directly involved with this network, and it seemingly fits perfectly with that of John Wayne Gacy's connections, obviously, and especially when Jack Ruby goes to Dallas before the JFK assassination. So whenever he moved to Dallas, he rents an apartment from John David Norman, who's running the Odyssey Foundation. So
Just
come on, knowing his connections to the Chicago
what are the
crime
odds?
families,
What are the odds?
come on now. And
What are the
especially
odds?
since the Delta Project began in Illinois, or the Odyssey Foundation. So it's perfect, and it makes all the sense in the world. So here's the point of the connection between John Wayne Gacy and Norman, because it looks like this connection comes from Phil Paskey, who's a close associate of Norman and of John Wayne Gacy, because he was briefly employed with John Wayne Gacy's construction business, PDM Contractors, while John David Norman was still incarcerated. So it looks as if they rebranded the Odyssey Foundation into the Delta Project while he was after John David Norman was overexposed and criminally convicted, and then as he's in prison, he's in prison with Phil Paskey for a brief time, and he is sort of anoints him as the sort of overarching leader of the network as he's in prison. So essentially, he was tasked with taking over the Odyssey Foundation as the Delta Project on behalf of John David Norman while he's still incarcerated. And so while he's in charge of the network itself, he is currently employed with PDM Contractors, the John Wayne Gacy's construction crew. So that in itself, come on. When all those bodies are found at John Wayne Gacy's place, he's running a construction crew. He's going to all these it seems as if this is just far too convenient. And Paskey was alleged to have taken over running the Delta Project, obviously, after Norman went to prison. But Paskey was also at Norman's apartment during his 1978 arrest, though Paskey himself obviously wasn't arrested at that time. But Gacy implicated Paskey, Norman, and two other PDM employees as his accomplices in murder. He described Paskey as dangerous and stated that he pimped girls, boys for sex or movies. So it doesn't look like John Wayne Gacy did a whole lot except for obviously facilitate the network, and I'm sure engage in some of the sadistic abuse, and I'm sure he was somehow involved in some of the killings. I'm not obviously defending that, but the point being, this was a wider network, no doubt. And there was an interview in 1992 where Gacy claimed Norman and the Delta Project were producing snuff films of young boys, possibly including some of Gacy's victims. So, it makes far more sense that that number of victims was more than likely just kind of taking out, tying off the loose ends and effectively covering up their tracks as they engaged in this sort of enterprise of producing snuff films for the wider criminal network. So that in itself, but the craziest connection and the point I was trying to inevitably make was basically that there is a crazy direct affiliation to that of Paul Benassi, who's the Franklin scandal victim, implicated in the confessions of a DC madam as well. And it looks like he was even at the foundation in Boston, Massachusetts of NAMBLA, the North American Man Boy Love Association. He claimed that he was there with members of the Catholic clergy and local authorities who were effectively creating this organization to essentially normalize pedophilia, right, and create a protected class for that sort of degenerate lifestyle. And then it's also Paul Benassi was internationally trafficking child pornography on behalf of members of NAMBLA, and that was effectively proven as well. And so the point being is that Paul Benassi looks like the very first victim of, now this comes through the lens of the Timothy McCoy murder case, right? Okay. And I had no idea about this until just recently, but basically this kid was an American teenager from Omaha Okay, the Franklin scandal, right? Omaha, Nebraska,
Yes.
exactly where Paul Benassi was caught up in this network, and he is the first known victim of serial killer and sex offender John Wayne Gacy. Timothy Mc,
Well,
Timothy McCoy is now. It turns out Timothy McCoy happens to be the son of Jack McCoy, who would marry Paul Benassi's mother and become Paul's stepfather. So Paul Benassi's stepbrother was John Wayne Gacy's first victim.
huh.
Tell me that. I mean, come
Listen,
on.
these are all clearly just coincidences. You're crazy. You're a
I'm
crazy
crazy,
person,
buddy.
dude.
Yeah, that
It's-
itself is too much, it's too much,
oh,
and
man.
that's why I think, understanding that Wade Michael Page perfectly fits this profile of the seventh adult male shooter, and,
Yeah.
uh, and reportedly has these close ties to the Trenchcoat Mafia and the Western Hammerskins, then, it's difficult to at least dismiss the notion that, this individual is very much a part of the two hit teams that were stationed at Columbine that day to maximize casualties.
Well, and I think a good thing too to talk about there is like because I think most people like I forgot about this. Actually, I don't even know if I knew about this, but I was listening to your episode. I was like, because they set off like explosive devices and stuff. I
Mhm.
thought like I think everyone just goes like, yeah, it's just guns and stuff. It was just shooting and stuff like that. And but apparently, because I think that might be a good thing to talk about too, because a lot of people will go like, "What are you talking about? It's just they just killed a couple people." Like, what was the level of destruction at Columbine?
Man, it's very interesting because it seems like they had developed over 99 explosive devices that included pipe bombs, dry ice bombs, and propane bombs, right? And also, I think it's also very interesting because they fired like a total of 188 rounds of ammunition, and I also think an interesting point is that. Eric Harris basically fired twice as much as Dylan Klebold. And I think that's important because I believe Eric Harris was far more likely programmed than even Dylan. And the way it was described by students at Columbine is that Dylan basically was sort of brought into Eric in a way. Eric kind of took over his psychology in a sort of way leading up to the shooting in a strange sort of sense. And but I will also say that many different people claim that there's no way that these individuals showed any signs that they were capable of such heinous crimes. And they seem to have been normal kids, for the most part, as far as a lot of the witness accounts from the students. But yeah, it was, I believe even law enforcement, I think, fired like 141 rounds. So, like around, it was quite a shootout, let's just say, and multiple different engagements with the police as far as attempted shootout and engagement with them. So it's interesting. But in addition to the firearms, as you mentioned, this attack was supposed to initially be a bombing and only secondarily a shooting, basically. And so that's
Really?
why, yeah, they had hoped to even collapse the library on top of the cafeteria because it was actually above the cafeteria, and that's why you have a second story. Whenever, if you look at the footage of Columbine, you see this. There's this infamous picture of this kid basically hanging out of the broken window in the library above the cafeteria until the authorities go in and pull him down, basically. And it's very interesting, but it seems like the ultimate goal was to actually destroy that portion of the school. And they had apparently even staged the school with I think they planted over 13 bombs. I forget where exactly they were. Somewhere in the cafeteria, somewhere they were stationed in various parts of the school, but not all of them went off clearly, and they even attempted to activate some of the propane bombs while they were in the cafeteria. I think Dylan was shooting at one of them, trying to actually force it to explode. At one point, they triggered a fire because they blew up one of the pipe bombs, but then apparently the sprinkler system just very quickly kind of eradicated the fire. But either way, Harrison-Klebold had constructed 99 bombs in total, 27 pipe bombs, 48 carbon dioxide cartridges filled with gunpowder called crickets, 7 Molotovs, 15 propane tanks converted to bombs. 5 of them were around 20 pounds or more. 2 propane bombs were used in the cafeteria, 2 in the shooters' cars, and in apparently another location that was intended to be a diversion, which I think was out in a field close to where the designated smoking area, basically for some of the students who would smoke cigarettes at the time, and that was where the police liaison officer happened to be whenever the shooting took place, which he usually is has his lunch in the cafeteria with the rest of the students. So I found that to be interesting, but still, and also the surveillance camera footage is 3 hours and 33 minutes in total. Which is very strange, right? Just as far as the occult, sort of symbolic nature of 333.
Oh yeah, isn't that like was it Freemasons like 33?
Oh, it definitely 33 always plays into
What's
it.
333 though?
It is easily a kind of a representation of 666, right? It's basically it's kind of how it's interpreted in many ways, but either way. I found it interesting, and
Yeah.
I will say that
It's always funny how that stuff pops up.
And
Because I'm like, it really makes me also too like we don't talk enough about how big of like the thing that always gets me about this is how much theater kid energy surrounds it. Where it's like it's like you're also gonna throw in your little symbols to let everyone know like you did it.
Exactly, man.
You fucking
That's what they do, man.
fucking dorks.
Well, you know what's crazy is that I had mentioned the federal involvement on the ground at Columbine, and they had infiltrated every level of the investigation. And the FBI vault documents even basically described through a FOIA that there was an internal FBI document dated for the day of the massacre. And essentially, it claims that the FBI's sole responsibility in the investigation is to assist Jefferson County, Colorado authorities as requested. Now, this included providing 2 evidence response teams, ERT, the Denver bomb technicians, the SWAT team, and a number of agents used for interviewing purposes. So all of that was provided by the federal authorities. It wasn't local law enforcement. I think that's important, especially knowing that I believe a local police officer who responded to the shooting actually murdered Danny Rohrbaugh, who's one of the students, the Columbine students, who was trying to flee from the shooting. And and later on, I believe they covered that up.
Oh, they covered it up.
Yeah, it's terrible. Even the parents sued the authorities of Jefferson County Police Department and various other local authorities for that very reason, claiming that their children were actually shot and killed by the local authorities during the response, and they weren't actually killed by Eric Harris or Dylan Klebold. But later on, they would change the official narrative and say that Danny Rohrbaugh didn't die as he was fleeing outside of the school on the sidewalk. He actually died on the stairwell. It's complete nonsense, and so this is why I think you had local law enforcement was very much covering their tracks, because I think they had a major there were just major criticisms being kind of lobbed toward the response of the authorities themselves, which obviously, knowing that they waited around 4 hours to even enter the building is insane, right? Yeah. Because you have to imagine the first thing you should do as a response team to a mass shooting is to enter the building and engage the shooters.
They probably had to stretch or something. You know what I mean?
My God, buddy, it's just crazy.
It's crazy. Wait, I want to go back real quick about the amount of like guns and bombs that they have, because so you said they had some of them stationed. They had some of them stationed at a different location as a possible distraction, but like the sheer amount, because that's again, it's one of my catchphrases. I'm a big logistics guy. The sheer amount is like, are we supposed to believe? Well, because you were saying they had like 5 or some bombs that were over 20 pounds, but devil's advocate, I'm sure a lot of them were small. You know what I mean? But like, devil's advocate. You know what I mean?
Right.
Uh, but I'm sure of a lot of them. But like, once you get to that level, is it just implied that they brought all of this in at once?
Yeah, see, that's the issue, is that they even believe there was sort of the investigators at the time had even mentioned the possibility that the bombs had been planted over the weekend during the
Mm,
after prom party, allegedly. And
okay.
so it's possible. I know Dylan went to the prom. I can't remember. I don't think Eric did, but I can't recall. But either way, this notion of two teenagers with I love the way that Dave McGowan described it as well. That was the reason why I named my episode "The Anatomy of a School Shooting," because that was the article Dave McGowan wrote just after Columbine occurred, and it's amazing because he really does briefly address all of the gaping holes in the official narrative, and clearly kind of describes how insane it is to imagine that these kids, were not at all, as far as caught throughout the process of staging the school with bombs, right? And I think the way he described it was, uh, obviously you had shots ringing out even 3.5 hours after it had begun, right? So again, mentioning the kind of the official shooting ended within 45 minutes, but we still have shots being heard 3 hours and 45 minutes later, right? And so that in itself is why is a shooting still actively taking place after 3 hours, basically 2 hours after the shooters had been killed, right,
Yeah.
or had died. And so that in itself is very interesting. But yeah, and then obviously you would have to think that the fact that the two were already dead and would have, as far as it would have at least, you know, limited the amounts of that the law enforcement would have considered discharging their weapons. You would think, at the very least. I don't know. It's very strange that they would still be actively shooting after the shooters were killed. But either way, it beyond that, right? You have the issue of the bombs being strategically placed throughout the school, as you had mentioned, and this is all happening allegedly prior to the shootings. And what they had I think the official narrative basically explains it as the the member of the custodial staff, or the janitor, basically, right, who was in charge of switching the tapes out at the exact same moment, as far as the surveillance cameras would have picked up Dylan and Eric bringing the bags, the duffel bag, the black bags, into the cafeteria where they allegedly placed them with the rest of the students' backpacks, and were not at all sort of caught in the act. And this camera footage would have actually, obviously, uh, it would have caught this moment of them bringing in the black bags filled with pipe bombs and various weapons that they were hoping to use. But in reality, that was the exact same moment, conveniently, that the janitor would switch tapes, and we have a gaping hole in the surveillance camera footage in that moment. So we'll never be provided the evidence of them clearly, of us being able to actually witness them, place the bags into position. So that in itself is kind of very suspect, in my opinion. But so yeah, you have this. I'm very skeptical that these two individuals could have transported and placed all these explosive devices that were found in the school without being caught. Without any of the school staff or administrative staff noticing that this was taking place.
Yeah,
I mean,
and
don't
just
you?
just a refresher, how many, because they had a lot of bombs that they threw, but how many did they
Mhm.
actually place?
Yeah, see, that it's like I believe it was around 13 or something. It wasn't that many, kind of, but it was still enough that
Yeah,
you, you know.
it's a lot of bombs to put in your school and not get noticed.
Oh, hell yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. And also the 20-pound bomb found inside the Columbine High School kitchen, right? In many ways, I believe there was a police report that came out in April, the very same month of the shooting. And they claimed, this is a quote from April 23rd, 1999. The 20-pound bomb found inside the Columbine High School kitchen suggests the two teenage suspects were aided by others in their plot to blow up the school. packed inside a duffel bag with a wired gasoline can and surrounded with nails and BBs for maximum killing power. The propane barbecue tank bomb points to a wider conspiracy, police said.
Mm.
That's the same month as the shooting,
Well,
right?
no, and that's a funny thing too, that for people who aren't as familiar with a lot of these stories, is that's one thing I've always noticed is in many of these incidences, if you go to the actual reporting the week or month after it happened, many a times there'll be like reporters being like, well, clearly more people did this. You know what I mean? It happens with OKC. Like, clearly there was like everyone saw a second guy, John Doe number 2.
Yep.
Yeah, there's a bunch of these where, yeah, a lot of people in those moments just like will acknowledge that they're like the agreed upon narrative is just people assuming more people are involved, and then it's over time that just the whatever you want to call it, the mainstream whatever narrative, it just gets hammered home where it's like, no, it's this. But yes, in a lot of instances, people are kind of at like, people's first instinct is to be like, oh, there's multiple people involved. You know what I mean?
Man, you
Like,
know what's crazy? I just looked up because I felt like 13 was too low of a number. I just looked up the actual number of bombs that were strategically placed throughout the school.
tell me.
95 of the 99. Yeah, I thought it
Like,
was 13 for some reason. That's
but
terrible, but
just to be clear, you're saying
mhm.
bombs that they placed on the ground before the day?
No, this is just as far as what the bomb squad found placed in position in the school. They're not sure exactly when
Okay.
this took place, but the official narrative would like to explain it away as they somehow did this all within the 4 hours of coming to school at 6:15 a.m. Before they left at an undocumented time. I believe both of the students, Eric and Dylan, had left to go change their clothes and come back with their arsenal. But they each parked in separate locations as well, went into the school, met up with each other, and went back out to the parking lot to gear up. This was at like 10:15 a.m. So we're supposed to be under the impression that if they didn't prior to the day place the bomb strategically over the weekend, then they had somehow effectively achieved this without alerting any one of the authorities at the school. They had allegedly placed up to 95 bombs all throughout the school within the course of 6:15 a.m. to 10:15 a.m. before the shooting began. So that's too much for me to accept, honestly, as far as what kind of school is operating at this level. I mean, I don't know. I couldn't imagine being
I mean,
able
like,
to have walked
could they,
freely through the school placing
yeah.
bombs,
Well,
95 bombs.
could they have been placing bombs during their rampage?
Well, that definitely was happening, right? And
Yeah.
so it's not as if I guess we should be under the impression that all 95 were placed prior to the event taking place. So it is possible. I mean, I know they were throwing pipe bombs in random locations as well.
Yeah.
At during the course of the shooting, they had thrown one near the teacher who bled out over the course of 3 hours, being obviously unattended with any sort of medical attention. I mean, he unfortunately died and bled out in one of the classrooms. And
Also, I'm sorry. This is gonna sound morbid and emotionless. If you put in all that work to make 95 bombs and you're just gonna spend the whole time shooting people, like,
right,
why? Like, like, I'm not trying to be like more. I'm just trying. Again, I'm a logistics guy. Just to be like, if I'm planning this whole fucking mass casualty event, and I'm like, because you don't just because you have to like make the bomb, but you also have to make it so if you got a rough ride to the fucking school, nothing bad happens, and
Mhm.
like you got to make them right. You put
Right.
all that effort in, and you're only gonna set off a couple. It's
I
like,
mean,
why even do it? Why just like,
exactly.
dude, you know what I mean? It's like, why not just grab a couple guns and just because like it's this weird thing where it has this like high level of preparation with a very haphazard execution.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's definitely
Why
true.
put in all that effort if you're just gonna like kind of wing it?
Mhm. No, you're not wrong, and I do think it's important that as far as just the at the very same time, as far as that same month, right, where that report comes out and the authorities are questioning the reality of this being kind of the just the result of two sole perpetrators that were underage teenagers. It seems like you had even the district attorney in Jefferson County named Dave Thomas, who he was quoted saying, "It is obvious to me that they couldn't have carried them all in at the same time, plus the four weapons." Right. So this was this was in May, the next month, that he made that statement. And then you had a sheriff's department spokesman named Steve Davis, who claimed that from day one we've always felt like there was a very good possibility that more people were involved. So ultimately, apparently they recovered it was 95 homemade explosive devices, including two bombs fashioned from propane cylinders. And this is when I have to evoke the words of Dave McGowan, because this is so perfect. He says, picture, if you will, the teenagers strolling unnoticed into a high school, each carrying two firearms, a propane tank bomb, and some 50 other explosive devices, as well as an abundant supply of ammunition. Picture them then proceeding to carefully place each of these 95 bombs throughout the school, still unnoticed and undisturbed by faculty or other students. Nothing unusual about that. Just an average day at an American high school.
Yeah.
Dave McGowan's the best, man. That is perfect, though, right? As far as just, you know, understanding the ridiculous nature of the official narrative and how we're supposed to embrace this as sort of ultimate truth in terms of how this was perpetrated and actively achieved. But in more ways than one, it seems like there were clear and obvious implications of these additional gunmen, obviously. So I don't know. You have dozens of witnesses claiming 5 to 8 individuals, right? Which is just insane to me. And obviously, I think the allegations of the third shooter that were so detailed, I felt like at least is a little important to mention, because it really provides additional reinforcing evidence that regarding the possible identification of a mysterious third shooter. And so one of the perpetrators was reported to appear middle-aged with a chiseled face. This individual was seen apparently calming Klebold down during the shooting, similar to that of a handler. Interesting. So several witnesses identified a known friend of the shooters named Robert Perry, who was allegedly a member of the Trenchcoat Mafia. And according to one of the Columbine survivors' books, she was named Kristen Kruger, and she wrote a book called Healing the Invisible Wounds of Trauma. She says a Columbine survivor, or this is her story, obviously, but she claims that the truth is, I looked back and saw a third shooter, who I and many others identified to law enforcement. No matter how many times I and countless others detailed the name and descriptions of that third shooter, who wasn't even supposed to be at school that day, no one believed us. One of the most traumatic aftershocks of that day was the knowledge that law enforcement ignored the warnings, ignored the signs hanging in the windows, and that countless other students who survived know that at least one other person was out for our blood that day. He still roams free, because the easy answer is that Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold were the only shooters. After all, they were dead, and the weapons used were found by their bodies. Only those of us that were there that day, and those who knew what was happening and who participated in the shootings or helped to orchestrate the massacre, know and speak out about this truth. The shooters were my friends. We were all the outcasts in that school, bullied because we didn't fit into the mold. I knew Eric and Dylan. I also knew the third shooter, which explains why I was able to clearly identify him to law enforcement. When it was all over, I realized that the person who I saw point a gun at us was not one of the two identified shooters. He wasn't even a student at Columbine anymore. He dropped out. He isn't even supposed to be here, yet here he was trying to kill us all. Columbine survivor Jennifer Thompson comments on the misconduct of the police in pursuing a sanitized official narrative that absolved suspect Robert Perry. She claims when they displayed all the evidence, they put my written description of the third gunman on top of my drawing of his face so that you couldn't see the face. Also, in my part of the report, you will see that when they told me I was one of their most credible witnesses of that day, they also tried very hard to convince me that I saw Eric with a sawed-off shotgun. And then they reported at one point, it seemed as though we questioned the credibility of the Jefferson County Sheriff's Department. And she says, damn straight we did. You also left out how I saw a friend of theirs bring in a heavy duffel bag minutes before the shooting. The name is redacted, but it was Robert Perry. I was one of about 100 people who saw him too. They tried their damnedest to convince all of us that we didn't see that third guy. So I'm
Damn.
convinced there was at least a third shooter who we have the identity of, right? Which in itself is too much, you know,
And
let alone go ahead.
and no, and she said it was her and like a
Over
bunch
a
of
hundred
people.
others. Over 100 others.
That's
Yes.
crazy.
Right. And then over 40 others claimed 6 to 12, which is just fascinating, man. You know,
Yeah. That's
it's
crazy. So like 40 other people were like, "Oh yeah, no, there was like a whole crew." That's
right,
fascinating.
isn't it?
Yeah,
And
because
man,
that's like a thing. It's one thing to be like, "Oh, logistically, how could these guys get in here?" And it's like, well, also just there's like eyewitness testimony. And admittedly, when it gets to the fine details of eyewitness testimony, it is like subjective because it's also a traumatic experience and things happen quickly. But once you get to about 40 people all saying the exact same thing, then
right.
you're like, I mean, what do we, you know what I mean?
Oh,
It's like,
dude.
oh, it's like, it reminds me of like the Bill Cosby thing where it's
Mhm.
like, brother, even if half the women are lying, he's still the devil. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
exactly.
It's like, and it gets to a certain point where you're like, okay, so what? Like all 100 people at Columbine are just making it up, or
Exactly.
they like it was just you know what I mean? It's like it's hard numbers to argue.
Exactly. And dude, let me get a cup of coffee before I describe this next part because I'm telling you, we will as far as just finally having I think one is the pre-enactment of made by the son of lead FBI investigator who was involved in the Hitman for Hire videotape that was essentially it was basically depicting the Eric and Dylan as members of the Trenchcoat Mafia and were basically extorting money for protecting preps from bullies is essentially what the video shows. And Klebold and Harris themselves were basically they were wearing black trench coats in the video, obviously, but and I believe it was Columbine Jr., who was a friend of theirs named Eric Vake, who he inevitably, I believe, gets caught up and goes to a juvenile detention center after a few months after. So I think it was October of that very same year in '99. He had been found with a diagram of the high school, right? Very much similar to that of what Dylan and Eric had created in the Doom Wad levels, which they had restructured the school itself as a diagram inside the private Doom Wad level that they had created, which makes sense to me as far as reinforcing their programming. If you're actually imagining these kids playing a video game, walking through the halls of Columbine High School, committing mass murder, I mean, it would definitely help reinforce their actions whenever they actively were kind of obviously committing the mass shooting, but at the same time, I mean, it's fascinating that you have the son of a lead FBI investigator who helped produce this pre-enactment of the actual,
Yeah,
especially because the conclusion of the video is that Columbine High School is ultimately destroyed in a bombing. Which is exactly what they intended to achieve.
that's
And
crazy.
as I mentioned, only secondarily was supposed to be a shooting. They were going to stage the bombing and then wait in the parking lot as the survivors fled from the aftermath of the bombing. And essentially, as they were fleeing outside into the courtyard and up into the parking lots, they would pick them off as they fled. And so it seems like that was the initial plan. But yeah, let me get a cup of coffee real quick. I'll
Yeah,
be right back.
that actually sounds like a great idea. I think I might do the same. Take your
Oh,
time. And also, hey, I'm here for however long you want to go. So if you want to go forever, we'll go forever. But whenever
awesome, buddy.
Whatever you're good with, I'm good with, brother. So we will be right back in a little bit, guys. We're gonna get some coffee, and we are back. This is actually gonna make editing later really fucking easy, maybe. But anyway, we are back. You were talking about the the video
Hitman
they were.
for Hire video,
That's
right?
what it was called.
Yeah. So, by the way,
Classic. Couldn't have seen it coming, except we did a thing that very clearly we could see it coming from a mile away. It was very this thing happening was very on our radar.
absolutely, and the fact that they filmed it at the school is
Yeah.
just insane to me. Obviously, using the video camera equipment from the video production class that they were both members of or a part of, and
Yeah.
and by the way, I mean, I heard many stories of witchcraft and voodoo being essentially taught by certain teachers at the school, as well as strange
Yeah.
connections. Yeah, they're
That was
teaching
the
them
end
how
of
to have
your
better sex.
that was the end of Jesus Christ. Sorry, I
Mm,
didn't mean to talk over that.
you're good, man.
No, and I would like you to touch on the weird classes because there was something about these like death
Death
classes you talked about at the
education
end.
program.
Yeah, so I definitely want to talk about Hitman for Hire and death education programs before we get out of here.
Sounds good, buddy. So it's important to realize that obviously this infamous Hitman for Hire tape was clearly 2 years before the actual mass shooting, and it was made in '97. So this depicts gun-toting, trench coat-wearing students moving through Columbine's halls and ends with a special effects explosion of the school itself. And
Is there
it's kind of
footage of this?
oh yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Actually,
okay.
let me show you the brief. I have one of the tapes pulled up here because it's crazy as far as just I think the basement tapes itself it's very important to realize that we never got our hands on any of the basement tapes, which I think I believe it's well over 3 hours of content that they filmed privately in Eric Harris's basement. And there's no official transcripts or anything like that, and effectively they were all destroyed by the Jefferson County Police Department in 2011, I believe. And it was all within this justification that
Yeah, you don't need that anymore.
they wanted to they didn't want to encourage future school shooters by releasing the public information, right? It's just like, my God.
Well, it's
You
like it's like the Epstein stuff. It's like we don't want to put the victims through this again. And then it's like you see footage of the victims going, release it. And you're like,
exactly. That is exactly their playbook. And so the basement tapes were several different home videos made by Eric and Dylan, spread across 5 VHS tapes. And some of the videos were on the tapes were apparently school projects and fictional short films made just, for fun, it seemed like. But very strange. One of them even depicts a car chase where they're chasing fellow students from Columbine around the school area to the park nearby, and basically commit this sort of strange sort of they kind of behave as if they're apprehending them, and then so they like force them to pull over, and then they kind of physically detain them. It's a very strange thing to watch. And
which also, just to say this, because I think it's always good to do a little devil's advocate. I know me and my friends did. Everyone makes videos with their friends when they're
Right.
younger. I think the thing to focus on is the content of them, like you're saying right now, is odd.
Very odd. Yeah, and and I think that just the Hitman for Hire video, it's so interesting to see them. They're extraordinarily at one point. They're kind of. I put the video in the actual episode that I covered, but I'm telling you, besides like the footage here we go. Here, I'll present this real quick because this is so insane to actually watch them go through this. And then I want to skip up to, because this is only 2 minutes, I think. But there's a part of it that's important because they start freaking out at the camera and basically yelling, acting as if they're yelling at bullies, the individuals that they want to target in context of kind of defending these preps from the bullies. But I just tried to share my screen. I don't know if it's working or not.
Here we go.
Nice.
Weapons on school grounds.
Hold on. Let me start it over. So this is Eric Harris, obviously. This is Eric Vake, their friend, who, by the way, was caught with the basement tapes in his backpack the day of the shooting, and he inevitably went to the front office, basically, and yeah, it's very strange. He was placing the tapes as if they were kind of to be discovered. Very interesting, almost as if he had prior knowledge of what was going to take place, because the rest of the tapes were in his backpack, but he laid a few out in the front office of the Columbine High School in a very strange strategic way.
Very odd.
You know, we can't have any weapons on school grounds. Get suspended, expelled, you know, all that stuff. But off school grounds, we can use our computers, get his address, kind of find out his schedule a little bit, and take care of him sometime. Any time in particular, you want this guy to take care of him? As soon as possible.
As soon as possible.
And,
guy, man.
Yeah, weapon. You want this guy to be a particular weapon you want us to use?
I want to see him blown up.
Blown up. Well, I don't know about that. That's often pretty messy. And you get guts all over the place, and sometimes you have to clean it up. The janitors get mad. I think we'll just use my AEB-10 machine pistol on them, probably. Maybe the rocket launcher.
Maybe the rocket launcher.
Hey, that's the job.
Yeah, it'll do the job.
I don't like it. I really don't. It makes me mad. Ooh!
There's Dylan and Eric. They just slowly walk down, and then they essentially take the hit that the kid is suggesting as far as which bully he wants them to target, and then you see them cut to them discharging their weapons on the fake bully. It's very strange.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, I guess.
For a cost.
I'll pay anything.
Alright. $20 a day in school. You know we can't have weapons on school grounds.
That's fine. I'll get him off the property.
Alright, we'll protect you on school then. Take away any bullies that are picking on you, whatever. And off school grounds, we can relocate this person. That'd be $1,000.
Thank you so much.
Piece of punk ass shit! Do not mess with that friggin' kid! If you do, I'll rip off your head and shove it so far up your friggin' ass, you'll be coughing up dandruff for 4 friggin' months! I don't care what you say. If you ever touch him again, I will frickin' kill you. I'm gonna pull out a shotgun and blow your damn head off. Do you understand, you little worthless piece of crap?
So,
Yeah, so that's basically the gist of it, right? You kind of you catch the drift, I would imagine, as far as what the rest of the tapes kind of just seem to represent and present as far as these ideas and the ultimate goal. But I will say, I thought it was interesting to see, just personally, you know, the sort of they're obviously acting in a way, but you can clearly spot legitimate rage in terms of those two.
Well, it was, you know, it was funny. It was a little bit of both too, where it was like you could see the rage, but also I was like watching it, just like forgetting that they committed a mass murder spree. Where you're like, God, high school kids are so cringy. Like it was just, and you're like, but it also too, they had the energy of just like regular kids. You know what I'm saying? It's like that is always, because that is always a thing, people. Because it's why I think the like they just snap narrative is what people glob onto. Where I just go like, I don't know, man. I don't know if you just. I feel like if you're gonna do that, you know, like it's pretty. I feel like it's a pretty apparent on your, not apparent. Apparent's not the right word, but I feel like it's one of those. Okay, like earlier when you showed that one dude, and I looked up his picture, and I go, "Oh, you didn't even have to tell me he was a pedophile. Clearly, he's a fucking pedophile." And you're telling me that like these guys don't even have a whiff of that on. Well, maybe not a whiff, because like you did say, they had the propensity to rage. They had the like propensity of rage, but I don't know, man. Like 90 bombs and shoot up a school. It's like, it's fucking weird, man.
Yes, it is. But you know, the the fact that the son of the FBI's lead investigator was basically the individual who co-produced the video.
Yeah.
That in
That,
itself is fascinating, right?
yeah. Go through that. That shit was so, I remember realizing that's what you were talking about at one point. And I go, well, that's fucking crazy.
Right. And so I guess his name is Dwayne Fuselier, and his youngest son is named Brian, who was by chance in the school cafeteria at the time of the shooting and managed to escape after seeing one of the bombs explode. So that was the other son of the lead FBI investigator. He had two sons, one of which co-produced the video itself, and the other was actually there actively within the context of the mass shooting playing out, and
Yeah.
allegedly witnessed it firsthand and made one of the first 911 calls. It's very interesting. But anyway, so he manages to escape, but then you have basically the Denver Post reported in May of '99 that the FBI agent downplayed his son's involvement in the film, and basically they claimed that the FBI agent Dwayne Fuselier, who was investigating the Columbine High School shooting, whose son helped produce a video parody in which the school is destroyed, says the film is a comedy and not a depiction of gratuitous violence. Special Agent Dwayne Fuselier also happened to mention the fact that the participation of his son Scott in the video, which was made more than 2 years before the April 20th massacre, obviously in '97, does not compromise his ability to investigate the case.
It's always funny when that happens. You're like, you guys got other ones. I don't know why you're so like, even if it's like even if it's like, yo, no, this is the most trustworthy guy we got. You're like, nah, just rather be safe than sorry, right? like it's that one. It's that thing of like, it's where the gaslighting comes in. Because it's like, you know, you guys would definitely be like aware of optics. You're like, oh no, I trust what was the guy's name? Whatever the guy's name,
Dwayne Fuselier.
Yeah, it's like even you'd be like, yeah, no, I trust Dwayne, but we get the optics, so we're gonna take him off of it. And you're like, they don't even worry about that,
right? Yeah, and it's too much, honestly. It's just a direct conflict of interest, honestly, and I don't understand how anyone couldn't have pushed back in a real way, tangibly at that point. Because I mean, at the very least, you would have to think, you know, for the FBI's lead investigator of the Columbine investigation, for him to have such conflicts as far as his son's involvement, both of them, there's no way that he was not involved in the cover up. So it seems like there was an FBI spokesman as well who claims there's absolutely no discussion of reassigning Fuselier at the time, who in the wake of all of the disclosures, you had basically Gomez claiming, this police spokesman or FBI spokesman, that there is no conflict of interest, right? And then, of course, Attorney General Janet Reno felt the need to come out with a statement as well publicly, and she had the audacity to claim it has been a textbook case of how to conduct an investigation, of how to do it the right way. So if Janet Reno is claiming that, the butcher of Waco herself, then I think all of us should briefly take a pause and reflect on the actual details for a moment, because obviously this was a complete and total conspiracy in terms of the family members and children of Dwayne Fuselier being directly involved with the perpetrators. So I'm not at all, under the impression that this wasn't a direct implication that of credible, of a very credible accounts in my opinion. And obviously the rising death toll following the massacre itself you have strange events taking
Yes, I
place, right?
forgot about that. I
Mhm.
forgot about that. It was after the massacre. It was just like people pretty closely related to it just kept falling off.
One of the mothers of one of the victims at the shooting, basically, she walks into a pawn shop and she buys a revolver and shoots herself in the pawn
Mm.
shop. And so the implication was that she either had brought ammunition or the gun she purchased was already loaded for her to have actually committed suicide in that context within the pawn shop. But again, that's just one example of a kind of extraordinary case of individual dying in that sort of strange way following the massacre. But another one was the subway shop murders, which I found to be crazy. It's like 10 months after the massacre took place at the school.
Yeah, go through that because I remember that was part of the podcast I was listening to where I missed the beginning and I
Mhm.
was like, wait, why are we in a subway? Yeah, let's go through that one. That one's really interesting too.
And I think there's kind of really, I think it's important in more ways than one because this, in my mind, kind of lends credibility to that of the Blackjack Pizza restaurant being somewhat compromised and a part of this somehow being let's just say a controlled asset of some kind for the enterprise that's playing out in the area, because it looks as if the subway shop that these murders took place in just 10 months after the shooting, apparently it had been under investigation for being attached to a drug trafficking operation, and over or 50 different cases were attached to the subway shop as being a prime location for that of the drug trafficking operation flowing through Littleton. So if that's the case, then I don't believe that Blackjack Pizza was in any way sort of unscathed by that very same process. And so I felt like that was the most important aspect of it. But I will say that the individuals were Columbine students, obviously, and this is just um, I believe it was only 2 blocks south of the school where the restaurant was located, and so the shootings had no clear motive attached to them, have never been explained, right? And so I looked into this a little bit deeper, and I discovered these individuals by the name of Stephanie Hart Grizzle and Nick Kunzelman, who were murdered at the subway shop in Littleton on Valentine's Day, February 14th, 2000. So that alone was interesting. Valentine's Day is an occult holiday for typically they engage in occult ritual blood sacrifice on one of Valentine's Day is like a pagan ritual holiday for generations, and it's very much kind of the connotation is ancient in reference to the occult, nature of the date itself, and that played into the Son of Sam actually with David Berkowitz a little bit as well, as far as Valentine's Day. But either way, so you have these two teenagers, students at Columbine. Less than a year earlier, obviously, the shooting takes place, and then on February 14th, 2000. Stephanie Hart Grizzle drives to the subway shop on Coal Mine Avenue to wait for her boyfriend Nick Kunzelman. He's finishing his shift right at the shop, and I guess she was going to provide him with a ride home. So he had only been working at the shop for around a month at the time, and another employee had apparently driven by around 1:30 a.m. and noticed the lights inside the shop still on, and that's when he discovered their bodies. So they were behind the counter, I believe, as well. But the windows were first reported to have been shot out. But then video evidence from news clips showed no signs of bullet holes or anything of that nature. So the media initially reported this incident as a robbery, but no money was taken from the register, and the security cameras were conveniently turned off. So it's also important to mention the fact that there was a deceased Columbine victim by the name of Rachel Scott, who was apparently the first student killed at the school and had previously worked at that very same subway shop location. And part of the Scott family, this woman named Beth Nemo, shared a backyard with this victim at the subway shop known as Stephanie Hart Grizzle, who was there to pick up her boyfriend. So Rachel Scott's basically one of Rachel Scott's family members named Beth Nemo shared a backyard with one of the victims at the subway shop. And so Stephanie once even I guess they had a prior relationship to some extent, right? Because there was some sort of Courtney Scott was Rachel Scott's sister and had attended the memorial in the parking lot for the sandwich shop murders. And so it seems as if there's a direct relationship there, and it's not entirely documented, but it does look as if they're family. So that alone, strange connection, but still remain unsolved, no motive. But there were credible leads that surfaced in the case just after it occurred. And investigators initially released descriptions of these suspects, one suspect specifically, who was a white male, 16 to 20 years old, about 5'7" and 150 to 170 pounds with blondish hair. Those details resulted in many different tips from all over the domestic U.S. And also there were a few different confessions that were given after the murders that gained national attention, but never ultimately ended in any sort of prosecution or conviction. So all the tips just ceased to come in, obviously, at a certain point, and all the confessions were alleged to have been false. And so then you have this very strange connection that I think is the most worthwhile aspect of this story, and that is all these suspicions that arose around a drug ring being operated through the subway shop. And investigators conducted interviews in more than 50 drug cases, but claimed no new evidence surfaced in that context. So I mentioned the other incident of the mother of a student who was shot and survived, walked into a pawn shop in October of that same year, asked to see a gun, loaded it, and shot herself to death. So the shopkeeper obviously would have supplied her with the ammunition for the gun, or perhaps she brought her own, though she had access to the ammunition somehow, and chances are she would also have had access to a gun if she had ammunition, but maybe not. But again, this is just another mystery in the context of Columbine and these deaths in the aftermath, obviously. So it's just difficult to chop that up to a coincidence, is all I'm saying, right?
Yeah, that one's yeah, I can see both sides of that one. It is weird. I'm also thinking too of like any gun shop owner. You know, obviously there's bad versions of every job, but like there's also like any gun shop owner, if she's like holding the gun and then like maybe holding it for too long, and then you see her in her pocket and then like pull. Now she could easily drop back and he doesn't have enough time, but it is noteworthy. It is fucking weird. Like because it's also too, it's like it's such a theatrical way to take yourself out.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's such like a theatrical way, because there's a lot of it's definitely noteworthy. I'll give you that 1,000%.
Yeah, it's just strange, in my opinion, that you have kind of loose ends being tied off, whether they're directly implicated in some sort of whistleblower involvement of some kind, have access to details that maybe the authorities would prefer remain undisclosed to the public. Yeah. That's when you become a priority target, and you could easily, knowing how many of the parents were actively in litigation, attempting to bring justice within, the court system to some of the authorities involved in the cover-up, then you would have to imagine they might be willing, right, to effectively tie off a few loose ends in that process.
You also reminded me too, because I was thinking about this where I forget the lady's name, but Tucker Carlson had her on talking about 9/11, which I know a lot of people in these spaces are mixed about Tucker, but I think the interview is fucking amazing about what they talk about and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And it's one of those things you forget where you're like, oh yeah, the family, because they always try to be like, you're a 9/11 truther, or oh, you really think this stuff about Columbine? You're like, brother, the families involved think this stuff. Like
Exactly.
the one, like one of the ladies now, I think she just wrote a book and she was involved with a HBO doc about OKC. Like she's one of the most like deep and hardcore about OKC, and I'm like, yeah, because her grandkids died there. It's like we're not. It's like dudes like us aren't just like fucking wacky dudes going fucking nuts. It's like, yeah, no. Also, victims who were involved in it think these things. It's they always try to make you forget that it's like the people involved are some of the ones where you get a lot of this information from.
It's like that student that I mentioned earlier talking about the third shooter. I couldn't imagine living through that and then, reflecting on the power structure.
Yeah,
And it's like there's no way around the fact that you would have to. And I'm very blessed and grateful to have actually had a conversation with a couple of Columbine students, and they provided me with like their direct witness
wow.
accounts and how they knew them personally, and they didn't even know the trenchcoat mafia was a thing at the school. And which is just insane that obviously you would have students who are actively there the day that the shooting took place have that witness account and
Yeah.
also mention how normal they seem to have been, right, throughout any of their interactions. And but I will say, yeah, the most extraordinary allegations coming out of Columbine were effectively made by members of the families of the victims, and so it's impossible for me to entirely dismiss the credibility of their allegations, especially after digging deeper into the details and realizing that there was a complete and total cover up from before this event ever was greenlit. And that comes in the form of the Guerra affidavit, which was effectively a memory hold at this point. But in reality, this is an internal document that should have led to, basically, it would have led to the authorities allowing for a search warrant to be obviously, utilized in terms of searching Eric Harris's property. And that would have taken place if the affidavit wasn't entirely derailed internally and never actually filed or even assigned to a case officer or an investigator of any kind. And so that in itself is eye-opening because it proves the fact that they didn't actually want to follow up on this. They were trying to cover their tracks leading up to the event taking place because they had prior knowledge. And I believe that there's even an account of Dylan and Eric being potentially molested and sexually abused by one of the arresting officers who had many different engagements with them leading up to the shooting, and especially with Eric. And because there was a break-in in a van where they stole this technological equipment of some kind, and they got caught by a sheriff's deputy by the name of Tim Walsh. And John DeCamp made these allegations, who wrote the book on the Franklin scandal, right? Or at least not Nick Bryant's book, but he wrote the other book on the Franklin scandal. And it's very interesting to actually witness the fact that it seems as if there was an alleged rape that occurred. And there's even a video that was taken into evidence known as the Walsh butt rape. And that was what it was titled. And so it seems as if there were many different run-ins prior to the shooting that Eric had and Dylan as well. With these specific investigators and detectives who were attached to them at the hip, and essentially were responding to all of the juvenile calls that were coming out of Eric Harris's home, including neighbors who claimed that Eric had blown up one of their trees. And then Eric had even the parents of Brooks Brown, one of the friends that allegedly was warned away in the parking lot by Eric Harris the morning of the shooting because he was out smoking a cigarette, and he had just quashed some sort of dispute that he had with Eric in the recent past. And so Eric turned to Brooks before he went into the to actively engage in the shooting, and he warned him away. He said, "Brooks, I like you now. Basically get the fuck out of here." And Brooks was kind of giving him grief over missing a test of some kind, and he was allegedly a good student, and so he was surprised that he had missed this test that morning. And but either way, I found that interesting, and I will say that I had mentioned obviously the Wade Michael Page connection to Todd Blodgett. That's where I think it's the most important, because we were talking Paul Benassi and John Wayne Gacy earlier. Well, it looks like immediately after the Columbine High School pretext false flag operation, right, which is how it feels in many ways, Wade Michael Page withdraws and turns up with an individual by the name of Todd Blodgett. So Todd Blodgett is a notorious Nazi related. So he's related to a Nazi, and he's a CIA operative, right?
Okay.
And so it wasn't just happenstance, obviously, that Wade Michael Page would resurface around 2000 with allegations that he had been reporting on his movements to Todd Blodgett of Resistance Records. The same, so this was a music production company, basically, that was helping produce some of these white supremacist labels, like the 9% label that was producing the Hammerskins music. Is very interesting. And so at the time, Todd Blodgett claims that he was intimately and confidentially meeting, possibly even funding, Wade Michael Page. He also happened to be working for the FBI and factions of the U.S. intelligence community. And Blodgett said he had met Wade Michael Page at various music festivals during the time. And on several occasions, Wade Michael Page discussed his musical aspirations, asking if Resistance Records would be willing to invest money in his metal band or provide him with a solo recording contract. So Blodgett claimed that the individual named Mr. Pierce that owned all of Resistance Records after buying out Blodgett had no interest in signing Wade Michael Page, and even said that he came off as a loser among losers. Wade Michael Page, he added, was a fairly shy, quiet guy until he started talking about Jewish people, blacks, and Latinos. So he's clearly implicating that he was a wild racist. But
no, that sounds like my
crazy part.
that sounds like my Twitch chat sometimes. Sorry, I'm just making a joke.
But I will say, this is kind of the smoking gun of this whole story, because who is Todd Blodgett? Well, during the Reagan administration, it was Todd Blodgett who happened to be the White House point man to Henry Vinson and Craig Spence's callboy homosexual prostitution ring that was under investigation by federal and district authorities, and included among its clients key officials of the Reagan and Bush administration, military officers, congressional aides, as well as American and foreign businessmen with close social ties to Washington, D.C.'s political elite. So Todd Blodgett was Reagan's White House press aide at the time and was ultimately linked to hiring a number of gay male escorts, including boys as young as 13, for White House priority target clients from Professional Services Incorporated, a well-known DC gay escort service. So, private midnight tours of the White House were arranged for a number of these boys, after which homosexual orgies were alleged to have occurred in offices in the new executive office building across the street. So Professional Services Incorporated was run by Washington Republican power broker lobbyist Craig Spence, who later admitted to working for the CIA while conducting high-level espionage and sexual blackmail operations with and through CIA agent Felix Rodriguez. That is the person who seemed to be performing the duties of handler for Wade Michael Page, possibly even funding him just after the Columbine massacre. So if you remember the Confessions of a DC Madam, that's Paul Benassi claiming that he was among the young boys who were arranged to go through the White House tour before engaging in the sexual orgy across the street. And so it makes all the sense in the world. I never had a direct insight into who exactly orchestrated that White House tour for the young call boys, but it seems to fully reinforce that narrative, as I had obviously discussed when I covered the Confessions of a DC Madam in my own solo project. Mm-hmm. And so here we are, right? Todd Blodgett as the financier and handler of Wade Michael Page, in my mind, a modern Gladio operative, as early as 2000, being directly connected, and would later on commit the Sikh temple shooting in Wisconsin. And obviously, in every way, he was already implicated to have been affiliated with the Trenchcoat Mafia while he was in Littleton, which would have implicated him in potentially meeting at the Blackjack Pizza restaurant with members of the TCM. And that makes sense because he apparently, the last person who was visiting him before he committed the Sikh temple shooting in 2012 was a local pizza delivery driver, and his only neighbor, who was actually a witness to his kind of actions leading up to the shooting just before. She happened to be a psychiatrist, right? Which that in itself is a little suspect. But then she goes on the record claiming that she had witnessed him becoming this kind of strange, isolated hermit and acting very unusual by sitting in a sort of daze in his car for extended periods of time, almost like he was in a trance. So I will say, if Wade Michael Page had a large appetite for pizza in Wisconsin leading up to the Sikh temple shooting, then who knows how many times he ordered from the Blackjack Pizza restaurant. But that's all I will say. Again, this is speculation. We don't have a direct tie-in to him legitimately, other than his affiliation with TCM. We don't for sure know, right, how he actually played a role in this. But I will say, I'm under the impression he was one of the shooters, and potentially that 7th adult male shooter that was identified by description, that really fit his profile, which is fascinating.
Yeah.
But
very fascinating. I will say though, I personally do love pizza, and I find myself sometimes when I get back from when I get home, I do catch myself sitting in my car for a while. So maybe they're just a podcaster. Who knows? No.
Well, the way that I discovered this crazy connection to the Trenchcoat Mafia was through this story of Pedophile Bill, which is insane. And it seems like
unfortunate nickname.
Seriously, but it does seem like there was a local child sex ring operating in the area at the same time. And this guy seems to have been the window into that, potentially being affiliated with members of the Trenchcoat Mafia. And so this kid who was caught with child pornography in his backpack is the one who went on the record claiming this. And he even claimed that he had been to one of the Trenchcoat Mafia parties with Eric and Dylan just before the shooting took place.
That's crazy.
So obviously that's important, but he says he visited the home of Pedophile Bill, who gave him the child pornography, basically, with a friend and associate of the Trenchcoat Mafia named Amber Rubio. But yeah, it's according to the case file, this detective asked this individual student, who his name, this is again through the El Paso County Sheriff's Office case file dated May 7th, 1999. And basically this kid goes on the record, making incredible claims after he's a student at Mesa Ridge High School, where he's caught with this child pornography in his backpack. And this is just over a month before the shooting, right? When he goes on record. And so he claims, and this is according to the student named Michael, or the detective asked him basically to explain what the Trenchcoat Mafia was. So this kid stated that the Trenchcoat Mafia were goths, but not all goths were Trenchcoat Mafia. He claims to have some friends who lived at a goth house in Acacia Park, located downtown in Colorado Springs, and that the Trenchcoat Mafia also believed that they are vampires.
Hell yeah, dude.
They are into bloodletting, is what he claims. So to join the Trenchcoat Mafia, you have to be cut on either forearm. Your blood is collected and drank by other persons present. This is part of the initiation for the Trenchcoat Mafia. Now, as I mentioned, according to this author by the name of Brian Desborough, victims of mind control are typically programmed to slash their arms if their front alter personality begins to recover memories of their programming, and this allegedly inhibits further memory recovery. Come on. I mean, that in itself is like, how do you even live normally after discovering a process such as this, and the sophisticated methods that they rely on and are far more, just as far as what they can achieve, it's incomprehensible, at this point. And I think understanding how you would go throughout that process of layered programming for an individual priority target, this falls perfectly into place. So it was apparently prior to the shooting at Columbine, on the Saturday evening prior, all of these individuals had gone to members of the Trenchcoat Mafia, to a member's house by the name of Mockett. this was later even given an address and everything, so it's interesting. But Dylan and Eric had also attended this party. So the individual student described the party as a mafia event. The detective asked how he had known Harrison Klebold. He said that he had met them at Acacia Park while he was hanging around with other goths and trenchcoat mafia. On one occasion, they had even allowed him to stand in front of Eric Harris's car and had a Polaroid taken of him holding the car keys. So another Polaroid was taken with redacted, standing with some female acquaintances in front of the same vehicle, which was Eric Harris's car. So again, we have obviously internal reports being redacted, which is always important. But so the anarchist cookbook was alleged to have been found in the backseat of Eric Harris's car, according to the student as well. Very convenient if he's creating pipe bombs by draining the black powder out of fireworks that he was. I guess he and Eric, according to Brooks Brown and well, it was Chris Morris and one other friend, I forget his name now. They went on the record claiming that, and Chris Morris had worked with them at Blackjack Pizza. It turns out that I guess they had shut down some fireworks stands in the area, and they were overjoyed with the amount of fireworks that they were given from the stand when they helped shut it down. And so with all these cases of fireworks,
When you say shut down, you mean like close it up?
Yeah, basically, yeah.
And then they
just
said, okay, here's a bunch
here
of
you
free
can have all these
fireworks.
free fireworks for helping us out, type of thing.
Gotcha. Okay.
So then they take these, allegedly Eric and Dylan take these fireworks up into the mountains and drain them of the black powder and create their own pipe bombs, and were bragging to their buddies about the crater they had made by blowing up one of the pipe bombs. And even the father, I believe, Eric Harris's father, Wayne, he actually discovered a pipe bomb in Eric Harris's room. And instead of actually disciplining him in any way, he takes the pipe bomb and Eric up to the mountains to blow it up. So
basically
that was,
hits him with you'll have to smoke the whole pack.
I guess so, but
Well, you like pipe bombs? Well, let's blow up all of them, and you see how much you like it then.
let's hope that was the point. But I will say though that this detective then asked for the student to basically describe the home where this party took place and things like that, and he claimed it was on the corner of a block that was a huge white house downtown. He couldn't give a direct description of where it was located, but he claimed that he could take them there basically, and he did claim that essentially it was right in front of a school and a park. So I thought that maybe even the location of the property mattered in terms of the network and procuring, having an avenue toward procuring young, vulnerable minds, in a sort of way that are kind of already fitting that profile. But so it looks like the detective asked him to explain how the Trenchcoat Mafia was structured. So this is very interesting to me. And apparently it factors into Dungeons and Dragons, and who knows if D&D really is the inspirational kind of I don't know, as far as just this individual student's account. It could have driven some of the details in a way, but I'm hoping that he didn't just make this up out of whole cloth, because it would be fascinating if he just was playing D&D on a daily basis and decided that he would provide a detailed account of the Trenchcoat Mafia through the through the utilizing descriptions of the game itself. It's very strange, but I had someone point that out to me because I had never played this, but so I was unaware of the direct connections into the game itself, but who knows what exactly that means. But either way, the Colorado Springs chapter is described as being called the Mulcavia Trenchcoat Mafia. Now, they basically hung out and listened to goth music and partied. Then you had the Denver chapter, which was called the Gangrel Trenchcoat Mafia. They are more interested in violence, according to the kid. In Pueblo, there is the Toradors Trenchcoat Mafia. He apparently didn't have much information on them, but he also claimed that the Colorado Springs area, there are possibly 20 to 30 members that have actually been cut as an initiation into the Trenchcoat Mafia's upper echelon of the leadership level. So interestingly, the student continued by relating that the Trenchcoat Mafia read the Book of Nod and the Circle of Lilith. So these are occult kind of what would you call them? Just as far as an occult doctrine of some kind, right? That's
Yeah.
clearly, introducing a philosophy to the members. And so the student was then questioned concerning the photographs that were found in his backpack of sexually explicit material. He related that before Christmas '98, he had been at pedophile Bill's home. He and friend Amber Rubio had gone to pedophile Bill's, who lives on Redacted Boulevard. While while they were present at pedophile Bill's, he had given him the sexually explicit photographs, and he had also shown them a photo album containing photographs of small children in sexually explicit positions. So upon observing this photo album, it made him physically sick, and he and Amber had to leave the residence. So when asked about the content of the photographs, he stated they were sexually explicit photographs of small children. Some appeared to be under the age of 10, and some appeared to be up to approximately 14 years of age. So that is, in my mind, a direct implication of a potential child sex ring operating in the area, no doubt.
Yeah.
And understanding the Star Chamber and the extraordinary connections to Michael Aquino, I believe his wife Lilith, the high priestess of the order, was directly connected to the Paul Schultz case. How about this? How about I just briefly describe the Star Chamber, and then we get out of here, honestly, if you're okay with that, because I'm tired of leaving this on the table every time I discuss Columbine. It's driving me mad. If you wanna part ways, we can, but I would prefer to just briefly cover this as much.
Brother,
as
I got all day. I got all
Awesome.
day. I'm in no rush to do anything,
Hell
but
yeah,
maybe
buddy.
get lunch. But other than that,
Right.
I ate too much late last night, so I'm good, dude. I got a lot of BK still in me from 3 a.m.
Awesome.
I got all day, Austin. Don't worry.
All
'Cause
right. So
yeah.
here we go then, because this seems to be the direct connection to what I had mentioned about the Nazi breeding experiments and what I view as the overall, let's say, overarching umbrella network that very much was in league in Littleton at the time, as far as actively entrenched with the headquarters there in Sedalia. So Paul Schultz and the Star Chamber provide us with the window into a connection directly into that of Michael Aquino and the White Eagle Underground. So this, to me, becomes the proverbial smoking gun in the form of this confidential investigative memorandum on the White Eagle Underground, which implied that the group itself was actually a cult consisting of high-level rogue intelligence agents and foreign terrorist operatives. So according to the memorandum, which was dated March 31st, 97, regarding a felony case of child abuse involving a man by the name of Paul Schultz, the subject line read, "The Star Chamber and White Eagle Underground in Texas Gulf area." And so in the background, the investigator received a call, right? Allegedly, this is how he became aware of this case in the first place. He gets a call prior to Thanksgiving of 97 from a woman who was living in Cypress, Texas, which was a Houston suburb. Her name was Belinda Schultz. She was 41 years old, and she disclosed that she had learned about the inquiry into white supremacist terrorism centering on New York City through a third party. So I'm just imagining, obviously there's what I described as a kind of, I really included a chapter of I think I described it as the crossroads between 9/11 and Columbine, because there are far too many direct connections to that of 9/11. Just understanding Wayne Harris, his background in psychological operations, and also being a high-level military intelligence asset in the Air Force. I believe that he then, once he retired, he takes up a position at Flight Safety Services Corporation, which helped train some of the 9/11 hijackers, utilizing their flight safety simulation software, which is very interesting. And I think it's really important, especially considering the strange diary of Eric Harris and how he really fantasized about a sort of 9/11 type escape from Columbine, as if he and Dylan would escape into the local suburb community and then continue by picking off police who were chasing them and bombing various homes in the area. And then they would steal a car and drive to the Denver International Airport and hijack a plane, where they would then fly the plane into New York City. So it seemed like this was a strange 9/11 connection to a fantasy of his escape, right? So that alone, I mean, is fascinating, right?
Wait, she's telling me Columbine kids wanted to round it all out with a quick little 9/11.
Yes. Eric Harris wanted to hijack a jet plane and fly it into New York City. I mean, that in itself, right? Take out as many people as possible was the idea behind it in the concept, but still too many connections to that of 9/11 in my mind. But still, when you see these details, right, as far as the investigator was claiming that the individual, Belinda Schultz, the mother, had faxed to him numerous pages of background information, including a police report. He really went to bat for her credibility, claiming she was she had an upstanding reputation within the community locally, things like that. But according to her, the ex-husband had allegedly sodomized her son, Nicholas, who was 6 years old at the time. And this was conducted in some sort of severe sadistic manner over a period of many months. And the sodomy had allegedly taken place in the context of satanic and or Luciferian cult activity perpetrated by associates of Paul Schultz. So the cult is also neo-Nazi in its political aims and seems to be associated with terrorist planning, particularly bombings and assassinations. Child witnesses repeatedly describe personnel wearing Nazi uniforms and insignia, as well as portraits and acts of veneration for Adolf Hitler. I mean, over a period of 2 months, beginning in mid-January of 97 and continuing throughout March, the investigator interviewed multiple different people who had knowledge of this case and knew Belinda and Paul Schultz personally. The investigator did not directly interview the child, allegedly, but was present on many different occasions when the child would offer information on the case to his mother spontaneously, or would be kind of questioned by his mother about the case as well. So this is when, obviously, the investigator speaks with key representatives of a Houston-based Justice for All, which is a citizens advocacy group. And what he claims is that Miss Schultz, Belinda Schultz, had made a 4-hour presentation to the group earlier in the summer of 96 about this case in particular. So the group had taken a significant interest in this case and was pursuing it publicly and vigorously, allegedly, just prior to the tragic death of that very group's leader. Her name was Pam Lynchner, and she died in the tragic plane crash of TWA Flight 800, which is very interesting.
Wait, isn't that plane crash like a big deal?
Oh yeah,
Isn't like a bunch? Isn't there like a shit ton of weird connections to that plane crash?
Absolutely, dude.
Which one was it again? I talked to someone about this and I forgot the fucking name of. What's the name of it again?
TWA Flight 800.
Okay,
right?
cool. Yeah, I was talking to someone and then I fucking forgot. And now we got it back. Thank you, Austin.
Like 230 people died in that plane crash, which is just crazy. But again, I think, it was essentially a part of the cover-up in many ways, it feels like. But this is where the memorandum kind of takes a turn into a much more darker place. And obviously it's already discussing satanic Luciferian child abuse, but but also it looks like whenever Paul and Belinda Schultz, because obviously with this interesting tragic flight, plane crash, it looks like Belinda Schultz was a part of the commercial air conditioning and air filtration business with her ex-husband, Paul Schultz. And so the two of them allegedly managed this company, which had been previously owned by Paul's father, Carson Schultz. So obviously he had been given a handout. He was more than likely kind of a part of this really kind of generational dynastic family that are members of the initiated in regard to the ultimate clandestine operations at large playing out. I think many of them probably keep it within the family as far as the inherited lineage of being among the initiated in these organizations. So Miss Schultz went on the record claiming that she basically ran the business because her ex-husband had a continuing substance abuse problem involving drugs and alcohol. She stated she and her husband had high security access and apparently high security clearance because of their business to all the major petroleum refineries along the Gulf Coast. So Miss Schultz grew up in Lafayette, Louisiana, married a salesman in the old business named Lanny Sladen. The marriage dissolved in the early 80s, and Miss Schultz moved to Houston, where her parents and siblings were residing. She had 4 children by her marriage with Mr. Sladen, who were around, I think, up to 18 years old at the time. But Paul Schultz was in his mid-40s at this time. And he basically had one prior child with his first wife he was married to, and I believe her name was Molly Ann Schultz. But he is the natural father of Nicholas, who was the victim of this abuse. And he was running the Custom Air Products on Hempstead Road in Northwest Houston. So not very much information personally could be obtained surrounding this individual. And, it goes to show, I think, that they remain very much in the dark as far as their activity in these networks. But Miss Schultz, she concealed, she claimed that he even concealed his past to her during their marriage. So it looks like he was kind of keeping things close to the vest. But she also stated she'd been told by his mother that both he and his brother, Buddy, who is also in the air conditioning and filtration business, were connected to the mafia. So that in itself, I think, provides the organized crime connection to the network. And then you have Nicholas Schultz, right, being the 6-year-old child who endured severe trauma and sexual abuse in connection with his father, Paul Schultz. And so it looks like he had a very extraordinarily high IQ, which is interesting because I feel like many of these abused children seem to at least be described as being, uniquely intellectual at a young age. And I think that's due to the level of abuse they endure. It sort of forces this adult personality to take root within the context of the individual victim. At least it plays out in that way at certain points. So he endured prolonged therapy and things of that nature, and to try and help him recover from the trauma. But all of this happened between the ages of 2 and 4. And he was able to describe like vivid details of the abuse without any, he wasn't even kind of revealing any sort of emotional a consequence during his description either. It was very interesting, but he kind of was routine in his description of what took place and what he endured. But so this is according to the investigator himself. He says that the following conclusions he had come to with a fairly high confidence level. He says, while much of the basic information comes from stories told by the child and or related by the mother, matching and cross-checking with other data and sources yields the following. Paul Schultz, through family history and connections, has apparently been associated with the leadership of the White Eagle Underground in the Houston area. The stories and incidents described by Nicholas, as well as another child named Lauren Roberts, whose father was allegedly involved in the cult, are consistent with what is known about the mode of operation and the facilities used by the White Eagle Underground. The investigator, however, was able to identify one facility which the child and the mother thought was in Texas, but in fact is in Colorado. So that facility is the Sedalia, Colorado complex. Interestingly, as I said before, Sedalia is only 14 miles from Littleton, a 21-minute drive.
Mm-hmm.
So this is where you have Nazi breeding experiments and fertility death rituals, right? Which I believe is exactly what we're witnessing in the context of the Paul Schultz case. I got to take a drink, dude.
You're good, brother.
So it looks like His father had taken him. Mr. Schultz apparently took Nicholas. So Paul took Nicholas to meetings at these facilities used by the White Eagle Underground for social and religious reasons. Apparently, they were not political, according to this investigator. But the child's alleged pure Aryan bloodline was apparently the reason he was tapped at an early age for leadership. So the child described incidents where adults in Nazi uniform actually prayed to him. He also describes conversations with a woman named Lilla, or Miss Lilla, who offered to be a stepmother after his natural mother had been killed. So, according to Belinda Schultz, Nicholas had identified Miss Lilla as none other than Lilith Aquino, wife of Michael Aquino, former lieutenant colonel in United States Army intelligence and head of the Temple of Set.
Well, goddamn. What the fuck?
So Miss Schultz seems to have been purposefully selected by both her ex-husband and the cult for the breeding of Nicholas because her alleged bloodline. So the nature of that bloodline is unclear to even Belinda or her family, as neither Miss Schultz nor her parents seem to have been aware of the white supremacist view of what they viewed as crucial to their plan of genetic engineering, is how it was described. So the Schultz family, Miss Schultz family, was very much they didn't understand the genealogical component that this organization was pursuing in regard to their family history. But the cult in question is apparently the same as a secretive group known to military and domestic intelligence officials as the Star Chamber. So the Star Chamber happens to be the decision-making cadre.
Sounds like a level in a Mario game.
It really does. Dude, it sounds like some sort of rank in Scientology or something that you could, you know what I mean? Like,
or no, that's where they send you to purify you. You're like, you're unclean. You have to go to the Star Chamber.
That's what it sounds like.
But I apologize. Please describe it.
Oh no, you're good. It's just the way that they describe it is this was the upper echelon. This was the leadership of the network, and they referred to themselves internally as the Star Chamber, and it was the decision-making cadre of the White Eagle Underground, and consists of high-level rogue intelligence agents from the CIA, the Army, and Germany and Russia. So the children described men in military uniforms who refer to themselves as First Star, Second Star, etc. According to one highly reliable source, that is nomenclature used by the Star Chamber. And the children also describe circles of stars at the facilities, which are the emblems of the Star Chamber. So it's been implicated in various covert operations over the years involving drugs, weapons, and even child slave shipments from Latin America, particularly Mexico. So this is the playbook. This is the Gladio playbook in every way. This is Iran-Contra resurfacing in the Atlanta child murders through the Hatfield International Airport, where they're utilizing a local faction of the KKK and a white supremacist organization to smuggle weapons and drugs into the domestic U.S. through these various avenues that are strategically set up all throughout the U.S. as far as avenues of shipping these trafficking, these shipments, including children, which is fascinating. And especially when you think, I think it was Ted Gunderson who claimed that they had auctions. They had child auctions in Vegas that they would host privately. And essentially this was a huge entrenched systematic aspect of the child sex trafficking operation conducted by intelligence. So it makes sense that you would have all of these geographical hubs within the domestic clandestine infrastructure kind of staged all throughout, the U.S. itself. That's how it looks to me, but dude, if I don't get more water, do you mind if I take one more pause break and then I'll be right back? We'll finish this thing and get the hell out of here. I gotta fill up my water. I'll be right back.
Not at all, brother.
Dude. All right. And then
we'll take a quick little break. There we go. My mic's on now. Just wanted to say during the break, Andy looking cute today, but I ain't gay. It's okay if you're gay, dude. It's okay.
People talking shit to you, man.
No. They're being very homosexual, and I appreciate it. I love being desired by men.
That's hilarious.
All right, we are hydrated. We are back.
Good to go, buddy.
Austin, the floor is yours, brother.
Thank you, man. We'll bring it in for a landing here in a minute, but
Yeah.
I just feel like, man, honestly, I could probably talk about Columbine for like 6 hours, but it's crazy how much there really is to cover in regards to this specific case. But as far
Yeah.
as how I had mentioned these child sex slave shipments, essentially from Latin America and particularly Mexico in this context, because there's a direct connection into this network that provides that kind of avenue toward procuring children through in which, by the way, this isn't just confined to this case, because I did discover that apparently there's a longstanding sort of geographical component to that of within Mexico itself, where you have this network and the Hand of Death cult very active and prominent as well. So it makes a lot of sense that this would just be an international infrastructure of some kind with avenues all throughout these various countries. But this individual is a Star Chamber operative known as Tenario Luga. And so Luga was apparently a homosexual lover of Paul Schultz, the father of Nicholas Schultz, who was abusing his own son. So the claim is Paul Schultz was actually bisexual in his orientation and was allegedly involved in the sodomization of Nicholas with Mr. Luga, who was known personally to the mother, Belinda Schultz, and other members of the Schultz family as well. So Mr. Luga is also known well to the ATF and the FBI in the Houston area at that time, and had been under investigation previously for weapons stockpiling and threats of bomb making. So clearly, if he's a high-level Star Chamber operative, this suggests that this network is very much active in all lines of the enterprise, in my opinion. And so the investigator was shown a mugshot of Luga by one of the BATF officials, and other sources suggested that Luga was also potentially even a BATF informant and had close ties with both the CIA and to the Salinas gang that formerly ran Mexico and was currently at that time under international scrutiny for alleged drug trafficking and money laundering. So how long have we? It's cartel land. It's the Alex Gibney doc that.
Finish this now. What were you saying?
I think we have a long-standing kind of just as far as coexisting framework and agreement with the cartels, who we have sort of chosen to be the winners and losers of that kind of infrastructure within Mexico, because clearly understanding that the cartels have been utilized by the intelligence apparatus to run these drug trafficking operations into the domestic U.S., then how are they not directly affiliated as a part of this network and, sort of insulated from accountability as well, because they play a major role. And so it seems like, just pointing to Cartel Land, that documentary by Alex Gibney, because it provided footage of members of the cartels in Mexico working alongside intelligence operatives from the U.S., where they're providing them with the necessary means to cook up methamphetamine and then traffic it across the domestic U.S. And so if that was a longstanding playbook, and then understanding Operation Fast and Furious and how they smuggled weapons into Mexico, and basically this this ridiculous gun walking scandal, the guns end up in Paris at that terrorist attack at the Bataclan. I mean, it's just insane that this was directly connected into Vegas as well. And by the way, Wade Michael Page too, because he's affiliated with, I think he was a part of Sandy Hook as well, because later on it basically appears in the form of this individual that he was connected to, called who was the leader of the organization known as the Connecticut White Wolves. And basically it was another white supremacist organization in Connecticut who provided I believe these guns were caught up in a major case with the ATF, and basically those same guns were utilized in the Sandy Hook shooting, and they were connected directly in to the leader of the Connecticut White Wolves, who was being financed by Wade Michael Page.
God damn.
Is that not insane? So anyway, that's just a
Yeah.
brief
No,
aside, right?
well, yeah, and it kind of goes into what I was gonna say earlier is like it is funny how because I have this like overall sort of framework I look at this stuff where a lot of this stuff comes down like if you look at it big picture, it comes off much more mundane than anything. Where dude, it so often comes back to it's like they're flooding the citizenry with drugs and they're trying to give the groups that they want to do what they want to do guns and it all just comes down to that, you know, a lot of not like obviously that's an extreme oversimplification, but it's so often that was like what was the craziest part when we were talking about the Vegas shooting where it
Mhm.
was like, you know, it was a lot of like running guns, you know what I mean? It's like a
Yeah,
lot of it comes down, you know, so much about the war in Iraq comes down to like heroin and all this. It's like, is it really just about it's about money, drugs, and guns all the time? And
pretty
then
much.
what? You get bored and you got to crack open a kid? Like, what are we doing, man? Like,
Exactly. I really think it's about, for one, what is the most financially vital aspect of the black market? And they will always leverage that to their benefit in terms of lining the pockets of the black budget. And so, how else can you gain funding for these covert operations that are not at all going to ever be publicly accepted or even scrutinized because they're clearly within this
yeah.
framework of, yeah, and so
And there's
it
no,
seems
that's a great way to put it too. There's no version of it that will be accepted by like the normal citizenry.
exactly. Exactly. So I think the mind manipulators have really devised the perfect plot as far as the public perception aspect of how they can and even promote this enterprise subconsciously within the minds of the public by allowing them to fall into line by facilitating this very network unbeknownst to them. And
Yeah.
the way that I started my episode was by quoting Bill Cooper in "Behold a Pale Horse," right? And
Mhm.
in chapter 12, which says exactly what you were just suggesting, which is he claims for many years the secret government has been encouraging the manufacture and importation of military-grade firearms for criminal use. This was all intended to foster a feeling of insecurity, which would lead the American people to voluntarily disarm themselves by passing laws against firearms. By using drugs and hypnosis, he claims, on mental patients in a process called Orion, the CIA inculcated the desire in these people to open fire on schoolyards and thus inflame the anti gun lobby. And I thought that was probably the perfect way to just briefly introduce the concept of what they're always attempting to achieve off of the back of these high impact events. And, just as far as the level of kind of, well, high impact events is basically the proper description, but yeah, there's another term I was searching for, but either way, you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah,
And
basically, you know, a lot of violence and death and murder will happen in a very quick short time.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's very strange about this this sort of Star Chamber operatives connection to that of Mexico and utilizing these kind of child slave shipments, right, from that of Mexico as well. It looks like all of this comes in the form of not only was he an informant for the BATF and also working alongside the Salinas gang in Mexico, but he was clearly involved with the CIA, and he had been utilizing that cartel to help aid with the money laundering aspect of the drug trafficking. So it makes sense that they would have these kind of strategic, kind of yeah, avenues and very much entrenched, it would seem. And but it was also suggested though that he might not have been a Mexican national, and he could have actually been Arabic from some country in the Middle East, such as Libya. So who knows? But Luga is a very interesting last name for a Middle Eastern man. But either way, that was was suggested in the course of the memorandum. But so the real last most crucial point is that the children were ultimately describing having repeatedly seen stockpiles of advanced weapons.
Mm.
And this includes planes and helicopters, and it seems likely that the White Eagle Underground, under the command of the Star Chamber, was planning major assaults on the domestic U.S. right in certain areas, and so that's where the 9/11 sort of connection is established as well, considering this specific group. But the command center for the operations was thought to be in Houston, in the Texas area, at the Texas Perfection Ranch, which allegedly Nicholas had visited himself, and was somewhere southeast of Montgomery, and apparently it was in a large antebellum home, is how it was described, near a NASA facility. So, whatever that means, but still, NASA seems to come up fairly often as well. But there was one earlier memorandum filed in October of '96, and this was the terrorist threat against New York City, which I thought the source of threat, and the White Eagle Underground utilizing this sort of these ultra-right militia ties to allegedly being capable of launching these biological and chemical warfare attacks to fulfill this threat against New York City, which is very interesting to me, and seems pertinent. But also, the White Eagle Underground seemed to have, according to the investigator, they are capable not only of infiltrating the domestic intelligence community, but of deploying and smuggling advanced weaponry into the hands of domestic operatives. So, again, I think this is all coming from a perspective of an individual local investigator who I think has stumbled onto something that is far, far more sinister than he could ever imagine. And so his attempt at trying to make sense and conceptualize this network, I think, is what we're getting, is that window that of his perspective, and not quite understanding the formidable threat of this organization and how well entrenched it truly was. So I think this is a man on the outside looking in who stumbled onto something that he was not intended to. And once again is swimming with sharks in deep waters and doesn't necessarily know how to swim, right? Like that's what it seems like. And so anyway, if any of that is true, as far as them infiltrating the domestic intelligence community, it's kind of fascinating to see it through that lens, because it makes much more sense that they were just among the initiated in the intelligence apparatus that were effectively facilitating this network. And in reality, he had no understanding of that sort of playbook that was being, obviously pursued. So that's what it seems like to me. But again, the way he describes it as well is he's saying he claims this is a major multi-pronged terrorist strike that was being planned by the White Eagle Underground, directly targeting New York City. And this is in 1998, right? So it's very interesting. And I couldn't imagine being this individual investigator when 9/11 happened. And right, because I'm sure he'd be like,
what's the oh, that's what that was for.
Exactly.
Wait, what was their name again?
So the actual investigator?
Yeah.
Okay. So this, it looks like it came from this is from the Paul Schultz case, and it was an internal case file that was filed there in Houston, right?
Oh,
and,
okay.
Yeah. And again, I'm trying to find the actual investigator's name. I can't quite find it right now, but either way, I'll look it up.
Good, yeah.
But yeah, it seems as if this is a perfect window into, again, some sort of local investigator not quite understanding the scope of this network. And so anyway, it was allegedly, according to him, it seems as if the alleged motivating ideology of the White Eagle Underground is the kind of occult white racism nurtured within the Russian and German theosophical movements of the early 19th century. So he even associates the theosophical movement and theosophical society of some kind, reminds me of Helena Blavatsky and the Nazi component, obviously. But it does look like, obviously, there was a mythology that was strongly implemented behind this ideology, reinforcing the deeper psychological level of what the investigator described as the Christian identity movement theology, which that in itself applies to Randy Weaver of Ruby Ridge and his wife. Obviously, they were members of the Christian identity movement. They believed that the Israelis were imposters. They weren't the actual modern day Jews, and that actually the modern day Jews were essentially they believed themselves to actually be the modern day Jews. What's that?
Wait, you're telling me someone's got beef with the Israelis?
Right, exactly.
Yeah. What's their
But
problem?
I will say a lot of this ideology did definitely motivate the Aryan Nations gangs and those kind of right-wing militia groups in the 80s at the time. And so it makes sense, right, that this would effectively be connected in. But so essentially, what are the odds of a fellow friend and an employee at Blackjack Pizza who lived in the same town the memorandum names as the headquarters of the Sedalia, Colorado complex, only 14 miles from Littleton, just so happened to be directly affiliated with the very underground network of white supremacists known as the Brotherhood of the White Temple, part of the wider network, referred to as the White Eagle Underground, and apparently associated with the White Eagle Lodge. And so all of that is just too much, and clearly raises all the red flags. And also members, adult, basically pizza drivers that worked at Blackjack Pizza were effectively the individuals who helped procure the weapons for Dylan and Eric at a gun show. Right. And so that in itself is fascinating because they lived in Sedalia, Colorado. That was the headquarters of the complex that we're referring to in the White Eagle Underground context. So it makes sense that they would have effectively been running guns potentially and providing the children with weapons. But then you also have, obviously, the sinister connection of one of the pizza delivery drivers by the name of Nathan Johnson, who knew Eric and Dylan personally. In 2008, he would later get caught up on now he was an affiliate of the White Eagle Underground and this Aryan kind of white supremacist organization. And in 2008, he would legitimately engage in an assassination plot against Barack Obama in Denver, Colorado, and basically get caught up on charges for planning an assassination plot against Obama at the Democratic National Convention. And so all of that legitimately happened, and it looked as if they were also kind of distributing methamphetamine as well. And that makes sense because there was allegations that Dylan and Eric were experimenting with meth leading up to the shooting. And so if that was true, then they more than likely got their hands on the methamphetamine from one of the adult delivery pizza drivers at Blackjack Pizza who were actively involved with distributing methamphetamine in the area on behalf of the White Eagle Underground. And then, would later on in 2008 potentially attempt to assassinate Barack Obama. So, nothing strange to see there, right? Doesn't it all remind me of the Omar Mateen network and how Michael Sanford, who was allegedly trained at a black site with Omar Mateen and what was it, James Wesley Howell and Micah Xavier Johnson, and all of these individuals went and committed a modern Gladio style mass shooting operation of some kind. And what was the claim? Michael Sanford. He was the kid from the United Kingdom who was basically on the spectrum and was somewhat autistic, but was lured into being trained by the CIA at a domestic black site in Virginia, and then would later on go to Vegas and attempt to grab the service revolver. This is at a campaign event for Donald Trump in 2016.
Oh, I remember that guy.
Yeah, grabbed the service revolver of one of the security officers who were working the event, and he would later claim after he's wrestled to the ground and he's in custody that he was doing so in an attempt to assassinate the actual candidate Donald Trump at the time. So again, too much to dismiss as far as seeing the layers of the parallel connections there that you can draw directly into another sort of event that is very similar. But yeah, buddy, I mean, honestly, I really want to talk about everything else as well, like the death education program and things of that nature. But Who knows, man? We can always talk about that later on another
Yeah.
episode, obviously.
I think I'm just happy you went past. I'm just happy the stream went past 3 hours and 33 minutes, because that would have had a schizophrenic guy's head explode
Hey.
if we did that.
My head almost exploded the other day. I did an interview on Columbine with JJ from Operation GCD, and it ended up being 3 hours and 33 minutes. I was like, no, somebody's gonna see this.
Dude, I was laughing when like I could tell it was wrapping up. I go, we better go longer than 13 minutes when I realized that, because I was like, don't worry. Well, I was like, okay, we have to stop between 3:33 and 4:20, because then it's because if we stop at one of those, it's gonna look bad on us. But hey, man, this was the fucking shit. Yeah, man, this was awesome. Go check out Austin's podcast, Underclass Pod. Got the new series on Columbine, which we talked about a shitload today, but he goes into other details on a bunch of other things in that one. Austin's got let him know what else you're doing and stuff.
Awesome, buddy. Thank you as always for having me on, brother. I appreciate you letting me be so long-winded at times. I don't know. It has to be impossible occasionally to break in and kind of stop me at times, and so I apologize for that.
No, I appreciate it, because this is always, I like to just listen, like on stuff like this, because I don't know a lot. You know what I mean? So it's like these are very one. My job's crazy easy. You ramble and I make a joke every 20 minutes. So it's no, all this stuff's very fascinating to me. No, it reminds me. I remember when I first came down to Austin, I found myself at a party where Metzger and Michael Mouse were actually there, and I got to be a fly on the wall for Metzger just spazzing on something for like an hour straight. So and I go, bro. Yeah, he's the man. And I'm just like, this is all I want. I just want to hear. So like to have you in the similar format in a podcast, just go. It's my shit, dude. It's my shit.
I can't thank you enough, brother. You know that. And I think, I don't know, we have a good dynamic, and clearly we're friends at this point. So I couldn't be more grateful as always, man. And as far as Columbine is concerned, I do think there's a few other things we could touch on, but we'll keep that for our next episode, obviously. Yeah. But I gotta say, man, it's interesting to me, because the way I view the public school system, I mean, I basically am under the impression that through, assigning your child to the public school system, it's essentially the equivalent of voluntarily placing your child into state custody. And that in itself is, you're running a major risk. So I'm not at all, at this point, I am very much kind of disillusioned by the ultimate structure of society in itself. And I think that you need to understand the actual threat you're facing if you're meant to protect your child is the main point. And so maybe keep them out of the environments where any of this could potentially take place would be a starting point. And that's really my only kind of conclusion when it boils down to it, because as long as your child is at least not in this specific environment of a public school system, then at least you're not running the risk of potentially having your child become a victim of a mass shooting to some extent. And so I don't view school shootings dwindling in the near future anytime soon. I think they're very much as vital in terms of the strategic criminal enterprise and the dystopian outcome as it ever has been. And so I would just kind of warn everyone to just remain skeptical before falling into some sort of a preordained outcome and a strategic trap that has been set for you ideologically to kind of take the bait and run in the wrong direction that will only become self-defeating in the end. So anyway, nothing but love, brother. I don't know. I really have, I have a few interviews coming up, but beyond that, you guys check out the Underclass podcast, obviously, and the Patreon is the best place to support me. You can at least, there's an incentive there. You can get the paywalled show that I do with Brad Bankley and Sam Tripoli called Whatever This Is. And I'm sure we'll be doing another one of those soon, but it's always a good time. Anyway, buddy.
Fuck yeah. Go support Austin. He does some good ass shit. All right, guys. Thanks for hanging out with us today. I'll see you tomorrow. Normal time, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard. Hang out with us. All right. Be about it, guys. Peace. Or actually, all right, real quick. M. Fisher, thank you for the sub. He said, awesome show, fellas. You're the fucking man, Fisher. Love you, buddy. See you tomorrow.